It's a great day in Kershaw County. It's a great day in this all-American county. Thanks for everybody for coming. Got a full house tonight, and our fire marshal is counting to make sure we don't exceed 120. I think we can accommodate everybody. We got a full crowd, and because of the nature of what we have tonight, which is 4 public hearings and 1 public comments, I thought I'd take a second, and with the help of the administrator and our legal advisor, Mr. Bose, lay out kind of how things want to go forward, okay? We got a lot of people that want to speak. During the public comment period, that's typically 5 minutes per person. So you can see not everybody can talk for 5 minutes if we have more than 10 people or so. So what we try to do is accommodate everybody. So for those of you that know you have the same public comments as other people, maybe you all get together and choose a spokesman. And normally we sign up on these signs right here. So if you feel like you want to make a public comment and your name is not on there, I'm going to be liberal about taking a few minutes to make sure you have an opportunity to do that. Now, the public comments are not a back and forth exchange. They are for the person to get up and speak, and no questions are asked up here, but we take notes, and believe me, we act on them. We acted on those of the last time that talked about the fire, and you'll see some changes later on about how we reacted to those. So we value your comments in the public comment phase. Now, you can see behind me or behind you, if your eyes are as bad as mine, you can't see either one, where the public comments fit. And then right below that are 4 public hearings. And you're invited to sign up for that too, and we'll be fairly liberal about letting people speak who didn't know they were supposed to sign up. But if you want to come up, there's no embarrassment, please come up and sign. But there are 4 public hearings. I'll read them to you, okay? The first one is an ordinance to put into effect user fees for fire. This is for our volunteer fire system, okay? The second one is a public hearing, and I'll gavel between each one. You'll hear me gavel, okay? You'll hear me open, and you'll hear me close, okay? The second one is a public hearing in regard to an ordinance for the budget for next fiscal year, and the fiscal year starts 1 July and runs for 1 year. Don't ask me why they do it on July, but that's the way it's done. The third public hearing, again, I'll gavel it, all right, is a public hearing to set the millage, which is tax going forward for fiscal year beginning 1 July. It's the fiscal year 19 through 20. And then the last public hearing is a public hearing in regard to an ordinance by Kershaw County amending some rules regarding public utilities. So we'll do 4 different gavels in and 4 different gavels out. Anybody got any questions on that? And so what you'll hear me do is turn to Mr. DeBose, and he'll read down the list. And if there's like a lot of people for the public comments, which remember those are only 5 minutes, and then the public hearings are 10. Okay, everybody understand? And we really want to hear from you, because you'll see during the meeting itself that we have reacted very favorably to many of the comments we heard last time on the second reading. And just so you know, this is the third and final reading and vote going forward, okay? And it is our habit, and it's required by law, that we do public hearings on the third and final reading like we're doing tonight. Okay, you see how it works? And that's how the council gets your feedback that we haven't already had. And believe me, we've been talking to a number of you the last 2 weeks to try to get this right, okay? So, Mr. Bose, I'll call you up in a minute. We're a call to order. I would like you to look at the agenda real quick, because there are 2 typos I just want to correct out of respect for where we are. If we go to the second page, Danny, if you go forward. On the second page, we, by mistake, ooh, gosh, Danny, you're killing me. On the second page of the agenda, if you scroll down, it says new business, and it says the budget that we will vote on for Lugoff Elgin Fire Department. As everybody knows, it's Lugoff Fire Department. Okay, so please take note of that. And let's back up to the first page. And on the invocation and pledge, it says, Councilman David Snodgrass, the turn falls to me this time. So as is our custom, would you please stand while we go to the Lord in prayer? Come, Holy Spirit, let us remember the words of the good book where it says, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. May the Christ be before us, besides us, behind us, above us, and moreover all in each of us, that we may carry on his work here by first beginning to worship him, and then secondly, working and using our heads, our hearts, our hands, and our minds to his glory. All this we ask in his holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much indeed. All right, now we return to the agenda, and I'm going to ask Mr. DeBose to do his magic. And while he's coming forward, we'll move into that phase I talked to you about, is the public comments, of which there are 5 minutes allocated. But if there are too many people, we'll have to cramp your style a little bit. And so I asked you to see if you could combine, if you know of one or more people who are going to join you at the podium. The public comments have a rule system. I see a lot of you are new. I'll take the time to read it. It's all designed so that we can have a courteous and efficient exchange of ideas, that we might listen to your issues without a lot of interference, and also that you in the audience would keep quiet while we hear from the speaker. It's an opportunity for members of the public to share information. It is not a time for debate or questions back and forth. It is a time for council to receive input. It is not a time for council response. In short, public comments will be for the council to listen, but not comment on the public comments. Offensive and inappropriate comments will not be tolerated. It's the job of the chairman to maintain a loosely defined word of decorum, so to be limited to statements and rhetorical questions. If a group would like to speak to the council, request a spokesperson be selected, and that this person indicate the group he or she is representing so everybody gets a voice. Public comment is a time to discuss issues and not persons or individuals. Other avenues exist if you want to complain about a person or group of people. Public comment period is limited to 30 minutes with a maximum of 5 minutes per individual, or if there's too many people, then it'll be less. Now, to remind you, there's a public hearing phase after this that is longer. Mr. DeBose, please, sir.
Mr. Chairman and members of the council, 10 people signed up for public comments, and as you articulated, the maximum time is 30 minutes. So if each 10 people took 3 minutes each, that would be 30 minutes.
All right, who's first up, please?
First person is Dale Kirkland.
Mr. Kirkland.
Mills on Porter Crossroads. Number one, you raise taxes at the lake. One member of the school board said, you can afford a house on the lake, you can afford the taxes. So that means stay poor and you don't have to pay no taxes. Number two, the spec buildings in Kershaw County. When will they ever be sold? Who's paying the light bill on them? Why is the lights on at night where the burglars can see how to break into an empty building? We had no luck with spec buildings, but yet y'all continue to build them. Why? Number three, storage trailers. You all are trying to tell us what we can have on our land. It's not your land, it's our land. Overstepping, aren't we? house trailers. A lot of people can't afford a house. So they get a house trailer. But you all are trying to tell them where and where not they can put them. Number 5, fire tax. Fees on vehicles, land, houses, and whatever. What about car dealers? What about construction companies? Are you going to tax our livestock, dogs, cats? What about boats, off-road vehicles? What else can you think of? What about farms? I sure guess we could use the fry trucks to pull the picnic tables out of the flood land y'all bought without voting on the deal for us.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Now, I said we're not going to have any clapping here, all right? And I don't want to have to cause us to empty the building and bring you in one at a time, okay? Mr. Kirkland is being interrupted. We're trying to listen to him. And we understand there's an issue one way or the other. But let us keep the decorum straight up. And Mr. Kirkland, I apologize on behalf of the audience. Please go ahead.
No, I appreciate the clapping.
I know, but
Mr. Kirkland,
we're not going to allow it,
Would
Mr.
you speak in
Kirkland.
the mic, Mr. Kirkland, so everybody can hear
Bring
you?
the mic over in front of you so we can hear it. It's on Facebook right now.
You all are doing this without the voters say so. You are not doing us justice. Remember the Boston Tea Party? It was taxation without representation. That started it all, okay? Sounds like 6 of you need to move to California. You would fit in good out there. You know, they print money all the time when they need it, so it seems to me. So I say, vote no to any tax increase. Let the people vote. We should have more say, not you. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Very well stated, Mr. Kirkland. Thank you. Mr. DeBose.
The next person that signed up is Jane Doe.
Say again the name, please.
Jane Doe.
All right, Ms. Doe.
You have forgotten that you work for me, and I am here to remind you of that fact. You will address me as concerned Kershaw County resident, and that is the only thing you are to put in any of the minutes or any of the documents, because I am representing many Kershaw County residents that are upset about what you are doing with our money. I haven't seen a hurricane come through, so this is not an emergency. Even with the hurricane, there is no emergency to raise taxes. If you need funds, how about the people that voted for that swampland you call a park? We did not authorize that purchase. We do not authorize any taxes. You should be paying, the people that voted should be paying for that swampland. The only thing, you should be concerned fixing roads, trimming trees along the roads and utilities. The roads are dangerous and people die from overhanging branches. No one will die from selling a park and refunding the taxpayers' money. Public meetings are for the express purpose to provide answers to the public and for you to be held accountable to me. If you really want people to move here and stop taking property rights and invading the privacy of private citizens and businesses. Private businesses are not public places by definition of law, and you need to butt out of people's lives. Get a life of your own and stay out of mine. Adhere to the Privacy Act and don't publish my private information. We, the people of Kershaw County, need you to bring our roads up to compliance with the building codes. We need you to trim back trees so that truckers can pass and limbs won't fall on cars, killing people as they drive by. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much indeed. Mr. DeBose.
Third person that signed up is Lula Wood.
Ms. Wood. Ms. Wood, if you can pull the mic down to your level, that way we can hear you. Thank you, ma'am.
That better?
Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Good evening. This is the third time I've appeared before council. I moved here from Lancaster County in 2004, and I was complaining then about the fact that we're paying septic services, sewer services, and we don't have sewers up there. We have septic tanks. Our church has a septic tank. The people that are here that are from up Ebenezer Road have septic tanks. but we pay a sewage charge, and that's not right. The closest, I was told the closest fire department to my house was Beaver Creek. And I cannot complain. I had fire alarms going off, and they came over and corrected it. But the fact is, there's actually one down below Barron Cab Elementary School, which is like 10 minutes from my house. I don't understand why you should raise taxes for services that we're not really getting. And it's not right. If you can sleep at night with what you decided to do that. I don't sleep well at night. I don't have a lot of money. I'm not broke, thank God. But I don't have a lot of money to give away. And that's what appears to be happening. We are being charged for services that we're not getting, and I don't appreciate that. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Mr. DeBose.
The fourth person signed up is Ida Christian.
All right, thank you. Ms. Wood is spokesperson for Ida. All right, thank you. Mr. Bose?
The next person signed up is Barbara Thomas.
Ms. Thomas?
Barbara Thomas, and I live on Carter Street. And like Ms. Wood say, I don't get sewer service. We are on septic system. And we pay for that, and I don't think it's fair. I have to pay for my private garbage service. But we'll be charged for all these different things. I don't think it is fair, and I'm like Ms. Wood. I don't have a lot of money. I'm not broke, but I don't have a lot of money to be spending for stuff that I can't afford. And you need to take that into consideration. Everybody is not rich. And I just don't understand it, so take that in consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Mr. DeBose.
Next person signed up is Doug Fielding.
Mr. Fielding.
Good evening, members of council. I can't help but notice that our council chair seems to object to certain words of the English language. One word in particular he tries to squelch speakers with is, including myself, he's tried to squelch, is the word theft. Yet, no explanation on why the word is offensive, but only that speakers need to rephrase their comments. There shall be no law made respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Abridge the freedom of speech. Let's look at the definition of abridge: to diminish, lessen, or restrict a legal right. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Well, that's our First Amendment to our Constitution. What I don't read in this amendment is anything that states that speech can be quashed if it, quote, offends someone, or if they don't agree with the context in which the word was used. Perhaps council chair can straighten me out on that one. Even having used the word theft in my own public comments before regarding the actions of this council, perhaps a better word to describe actions of this council is going to be extortion. Let's see, the definition of extortion: to obtain from person by force, intimidation, or undue or illegal power. Many members of this council aren't concerned with the citizens' views, and that's demonstrated by their obvious disinterest during public comments. And as long as a majority of this council can convince themselves that their ideas and agendas are, quote, good for the citizens, end quote, that is all that's required to enact them as law. Therefore, this council forces the citizens of this county to pay for their ideas and agendas. That is textbook definition of extortion. Maybe you're asking yourself how any of this pertains to the discussion that's currently taking place concerning fire service. It's simple. It goes back to the definition of extortion. This council, by a majority vote, is going to impose fees on every citizen of this county for fire services
without any type of vote or referendum. I guess it's easier to force your will on folks than it is to ask their permission, isn't it? I reiterate, as long as 4 of you can convince one another that your idea is good, you enact it and then back it with force. What force, you ask? That's easy. Force anywhere from seizing vehicles to seizing property to even incarcerating someone that does not comply. Couch it in whatever terms you want to, gentlemen. That's extortion. And as always, I invite any of you to prove me wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Fielding. Mr. DeBose.
The next person that signed up is Jim Steele.
Mr. Steele.
Well, I come here tonight to talk about something a little bit different. I want to talk about our volunteer firefighters. At the last meeting, you talked about how hard it is to get volunteer firemen. And it is difficult, okay? The 200 hours of training, that's something that this council has no control over. That comes from higher up. But there are things that this council can do to help retain the current volunteer firemen, get more volunteer firemen, and increase the morale of those that are here now. Volunteer firemen get points. Supposedly they get a point for every call, but that's not really what happens, okay? The phone rings, the volunteer fireman drops whatever he's doing at home, usually on his day off from his paid firefighter job somewhere else, okay? Goes to the firehouse, gets in the truck, takes off to the call. 29 minutes later, he gets a call saying he's not needed anymore. Well, he may as well not even showed up because that call don't count. He's got to be on call 30 minutes, okay, to get that point, to get a stipend, okay? They don't get anything for a medical aid call, nothing at all. It's like they're not even there. So if you want to do something for volunteer firemen in this county, start counting a call as a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Well said. Mr. DeBose.
Next person that signed up is Franklin Alexander.
Mr. Alexander.
Good evening, council members. Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Franklin Alexander. I represent the Kirkwood community up by Dusty Bend. I want to highlight Ms. Phyllis Dye, who is also a fellow board member. In light of heavy subjects, I come with a lighter one. Just wanted to say thank you for the first meeting we had. There has been progress on our football field in the Kirkwood community. Also, there's progress going on with the softball field. Definitely want to highlight, if Mr. Shane Duncan could stand up, please, real quick. Hate to put you on the spotlight, but I have to. Mr. Duncan himself personally came out and chalked the field for us. Not a co-worker, not a worker, not a subordinate under him, himself, and he is the director, and that means a lot. So we really want to highlight him and say thank you to him. Also, each of you should have at least 2 flyers in front of you. One is for the jazz concert that we have coming up this Sunday evening. That is from 6 to 10 p.m. Once again, like I always say, all are welcome. Please come. These things are a family-friendly environment, and we would like you guys to come out and have a good time with us. Can't stay too long. I got to run. The next one is our football camp. That's coming up on June the 30th. Both events are free to the public. Once again, both events are free, so all you have to do is show up and have a good time, and I think that's a good price to pay. So thank you for your time. Once again, thank you for your efforts, and have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Mr. DeBose.
Next person that signed up is Tom Webb.
Mr. Webb.
I think there's some people here today who think that that the little people out in Kershaw County are not well enough informed about what y'all are doing or going to do. The people I've talked to, very few know anything about what's going on with the fire district. They just don't know. And we need to be better informed, and we need to have more input. We need to have more say in it. It's an American thing. I'm pretty sure that there's some people here tonight who would favor a referendum. I just wonder, don't make any outcry. You can't do that. But if you favor a referendum, would you raise your hand? Okay, I think you're outnumbered. And then I wanted to say something about the D-Day event over at the museum on Bluff Road last Saturday. It was very well attended. Could have been 2,000 people. I didn't count, but quite a crowd. It was very, very good. And I talked to some of the people there, kind of disappointed in government at all levels. So I wonder if you believe in ghosts. Are the ghosts of D-Day really very sad? So many people died to give us the liberty, to give away our liberty, to look the other way when we ought to be involved. And then we had the wall here last year. Again, both cases, these young fellows that died wore these things. This is a helmet liner that went under the steel pot. So there's some ghosts, I guess, that are looking to hold this thing up. A very sad ghost because our country is drifting in the direction of the very countries that we have fought against in the past. I think overregulation. Anyway, it's my opportunity, I think, to read a poem I wrote a while back. It's called D-Day Men. This is as close as you come to D-Day this time, so if you don't mind, I'll read it very quickly. D-Day Men. He's a man too young to cast a vote, but he's cast upon the sea to crowd aboard a landing boat for the beach at Normandy. The moon and tide affect his ride, and his boots fill up with water. Though fate decides perhaps he dies, he'll give the Reich no quarter. From the awful ocean wreckage to the strand of bloody sand, time plays tricks to stop and stand. Then up the hill and on ahead, it seems unreal and always will, so many men so dead. Now anywhere these rifles reach, the lesson's clear they came to teach. Men are not just lumps of coal to feed a Nazi fire, or any other ism that steals a man's desire. And like those men from way back then who fought the New World Order, we'll have to fight that sin again that's here inside our border. Socialism's creeping while the world again is sleeping, and nothing's ever over as we carry on a load. There's a battle always brewing further down the road. So celebrate the honor, the duty, and the glory when someone special comes our way to tell the D-Day story. Lily Marlene, the cliffs of Dover, and Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree. A rhythm, a rhyme, a melody of some old favorite tune, and we're back to 44 again, and then the 6th of June. All those ships and planes and tanks, our men with higher ranks, and all of y'all without much say, of course you have our thanks. Even the Huns who fought in vain to cuss you while retreating, y'all saved them from a harsher fame, and they'll thank you for the beating. Anyway, I'm glad to say real Americans ain't to blame, and when they heard their country's call, the D-Day men all came.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webb. Mr. DeBose.
The last person that signed up is Brian Spitzer.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for letting me speak. Can y'all hear me okay? My name is Brian Spitzer. I'm currently serving as a captain with the Kershaw County Fire Service. We recently had an ad hoc committee involving 3 council members and about 20 or 25 fire service personnel. In that ad hoc committee, you guys are doing now pretty much what we recommended. At no time in that ad hoc committee did we recommend having a referendum. The reason we did not do that is because it would take over 2 years to start getting any money if we had a referendum. I hear a lot of people say that there's no emergency in our fire service. That's because they're misinformed. Our fire service is in crisis right now. And what I mean by that is, in 1996, when I came in, there was 30 people in my 1 volunteer department. Now I have 4. The majority of the other fire departments are in this very same boat that we are, 10 or less members. Per NFPA and OSHA standards, you're supposed to have 24 firefighters at a standard house fire. Last house fire I went to, there was 3 of us. That's dangerous. It's unproductive. Houses are burning to the ground. People are losing property. People are losing their lives. A couple of years ago, a little child lost her life in a car fire because there were no volunteers available. We make no mistake about it. We are in a crisis. Our equipment is failing. Every day, fire trucks are going to the shop because they're old and they're going out of service every single day. Lack of manpower, failing equipment. Our fire service is in a crisis. And that is the reason we didn't recommend a referendum. If you guys don't pass the ordinance tonight, the reality is this: you're not going to have a fire service. The fire service is on the brink of destruction. It is going down the toilet. And the only way to solve that is with more money. To get more money, you got to pay for it. As simple as that. Recently, a fire district within the county, they imposed a fee and raised their millage, but I don't see their citizens knocking down their door because they're getting full-time fire service. Good full-time fire service, good equipment, good personnel. The fire department is on scene when they're toned out within the average 3 to 4 minutes. Right now, it takes anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to get enough personnel on the scene in the county to properly handle the situation. So I'm asking you guys tonight, please pass the ordinance, or you're not going to have a fire service within the next 2 years. It's not going to be there, because we are in a crisis. Make no mistake about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain. Mr. DeBose.
That concludes the public comment sign-up list.
And that concludes the public comments. Okay, everybody, now stay with me and I'll be, you have another comment? Oh, well, sir, come on up. Oh, okay, well, come on up and identify yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's signing the public hearing spot.
Did you want to do the public hearing? Yeah, that'll be during the public hearing, if that's all right. And what's your name? Let's make sure we got you. Your choice. All right, sir. Would you get the name, please?
Wesley Crowley.
Mr. Crow?
Crowley.
Crowley, okay.
I've been in Kershaw County for 18 years, pretty much. I've seen the fire department come to my house. Them boys have saved me probably more than once. Mr. Ray back there, he knows me. He knows who I am. Mr. Judge Hardis knows me. And I don't think it's right, you know, to decline to the fire department what they need. But I don't think it should come out of our pockets or the disabled and some of us that can't afford to pay it. You know what I'm saying? Because, hey, we on a fixed income, living in a camper trailer on a half acre of land. You know, $500 a month ain't much for a one-legged man with a prosthetic and a half a foot. And I'm speaking for all of them, not just me. Because fire departments come to my house a bunch of times and saved me more than once. And I believe they need the money, but it should come from somewhere else besides our property tax. That's not right, because you got disabled people that can't afford to live now. And, you know, I agree, we do need more volunteer firemen. And you can ask the chief back there. I've told him, if you need my help, you got my number. I've given knives to the sheriff's department, the fire department. Mr. Jones over there knows me. And if you want my honest opinion, I'm gonna give it to you. That's the real politician right there, and that's a bunch of bureaucrats I see, and a lot of greed. And that man right there is trying his best to help the people, and y'all are not.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Mr. DeBose. Certainly, and identify yourself, ma'am. I think you'll need to pull the microphone down.
Okay. My name is Angela Huff, and I wanted to just make 2 quick comments. The fire thing, you know, they have lots of trucks over here, and I know how it is to live in a rural area and need stuff. But you know, you're taxing people that can barely make it, and you're taxing everything that they need to go to work. And you know, these people that have more should pay more. That's the American way, instead of always across the board, unless you're going to do the sales tax. The second thing I want to say is I don't know how much money was spent on getting an all-American city for a county that is not a city, and then to spend that money on water buildings and things. Seems like you could use that money on the fire stuff, because when people come in here, do they not look at that and say, a county is an all-American city? Where did you get that, and how do you, when people come to visit, they say, do they know the difference in a definition? So that was my comment, was maybe you can move the money over from that thing.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. All right, I think we can move to. All right, sir. We're going to break protocol to make sure we hear from everybody. Sir, identify yourself.
Lewis Wilson.
All right.
I'm the president of the HOA for Higgs Creek. My wife and I have lived here for 23 years.
Pull that microphone up, Lewis. There you go.
I'd like to stand closer to it. Like I said, we've lived here for 22 years. During those times, we've seen 2 houses in Higgs Creek burned to the ground because we didn't have enough fire purpose. Currently, we have over 250 houses in Higgs Creek, and we're adding 50 more. And there's several other corporations building more houses in our neighborhood. In Blaney, really is what it is, Blaney. They're coming in by the hundreds. Those people are expecting to have service. They come in from a city or somewhere that's got a service. They're expecting to get it. Before we moved here, I lived in a small town down in Barnwell. I was a volunteer fireman, and I was proud of it. I saw a lot of different things. I saw things like car fires, businesses on fire, lightning strikes, and I attended a fatal fire where I was the first person to get on the scene, did not have any equipment to get the person out of the car, and had to stand there and watch him because we didn't have enough equipment, enough people. I feel for us. I think we need good people. We need to give them the equipment they need. Because not only do I live there, lots of other people live there and throughout the entire county. The Blaney area, if you've been through it like I have lately, the Blaney area is rapidly growing. There's houses that are coming up everywhere, and they come up like weeds. New homeowners are expecting, the businesses and owners are expecting to be up to date with fire protection. They don't even think about it until there's a fire. But we know that we need to have that in place. If there is a fire, we need to be able to put it out. And I heard 15 minutes to go to a fire. That's not good. The house would be down. It'd be gone by the time 15 minutes. We didn't have enough people. I think the time now is to get a fire going, get everything the way it should be, because we're going to hurt if we don't. If we don't get the equipment and the people. I was a volunteer fireman. I didn't have to do 200 hours of training, but my companies I worked for sent me to Texas and different places to get it. There's a lot of requirements for you need, and I know the federal government's pushing us now to get more people in. But it's hard for a volunteer person. It's very difficult to drop what he's doing, especially if he's got a job in Columbia somewhere, and to step up and come. I've done it many times. That's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. We're at 30 minutes, Mr. DeBose. I believe we can move on into the public hearings.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, everyone, that completes the public comments. And now I'm going to kind of guide you through, and Mr. Bose will help us, the public hearings. And we have 4 of those. As I said before, the first one is to place in effect service and user fees for rates and charges for furnishing of fire protection services within the district of the county. And you can see that up on the screen here, item number 1 under public hearings. Now recall, there's a different set of rules here, and I'll read those, but remember, I will gavel at the start and gavel at the end. The public hearing guidelines read like this. Prior to the public hearing, persons wishing to speak should sign up. And this one is in particular about fire. Item number 2, immediately prior to the county council being called to order, it be announced that people should sign up. Okay, so we're moving all right. Number 3, when the public hearing is opened, persons be notified as to how many people have signed up and in what order. So Mr. DeBose will be the next to speak. Persons will speak in the order in which they signed up, and each person will speak a maximum of 10 minutes. Comments at public hearings should be germane to the matters subject to the public hearing, and which should be liberally construed. Mr. DeBose, how many do we have signed up?
On the fire protection fees, Mr. Chairman, 16 people signed up, which means if all 16 took 10 minutes, the last person to speak was speaking 2.5 hours. So, but 16 people signed up.
So we're going to hear from you, but if you want to gather up and if you feel like you've already made your comments in the public comments, we'll go. But we'll stay here as long as we have to, and then we'll go to the next one. But the way 16 minutes looks, it looks like 8:30 before we get to the second one. So if y'all want to say that you've already had your say, then that's good. If you want to gather up with more than one person, that's is equally good. But we're going to stick to the 10 minutes. Mr. DeBose, would you just read out who signed up?
Well, the first person signed up is Dale Kirkland.
And then the second?
Is Ms. Jones, and then Ida Christian, and then Jeff Baker, Billy Saxton, Barbara Thomas, Mike Hancock, Jenny Hernandez, Barbara Thomas, Albert Huff, Lewis Watson, Irvin Branham, Derek Shoemaker, Tom Webb, Angela Huff, and Jeff Maddox.
So there you go. Mr. Maddox, you're number 16, so at 8:30 you could come back, or and just we'll work it along that lines. Mr. Jones, quickly.
I'd just like to let the people speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just move on.
That's what we're going to do, and that's what I said. So, Mr. DeBose, we'll just call the names off, and if you want to defer or gather with someone else, you certainly can. Mr. DeBose.
First person signed up is Dale Kirkland.
Dale, have you? All right, good. Mr. DeBose, next.
The second person signed up is Ms. Jones.
Ms. Jones.
Or Valerie Jones?
Speaker.
You've already spoken.
Thank you, ma'am.
The third person signed up is Ida Christian.
Thank you, Ida.
The fourth person signed up is Jeff Baker.
Mr. Baker, please come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello.
Got them stacked to the rafters tonight. In regards to the fire protection, as a resident of rural Kershaw County, I'm not opposed to fire protection at all. I'm opposed to the fees that are trying to be imposed. And evidently, nobody knew about it. I didn't know anything about this until a guy at Walmart was passing out flyers today. That's the reason I'm here. I'm on a fixed income. I have one question that hopefully I can ask. Are those fees a one-time fee, or is this a yearly thing? Every year? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeBose?
Next person signed up is Billy Sexton.
Mr. Sexton?
Good evening, Council. I thank you for this time. I moved down here. I've been down here almost a year now. And what I'm hearing is, first of all, I'm not against fire protection. And I just want to thank all of our volunteers, that is volunteer firemen. And I believe they needed their equipment to work with. But I moved down here to Kershaw County because it's a decent place to live. And I'm not in agreement with all these taxes you're trying to impose on us. But now, from what I could see, I haven't been down here long and I don't know everything that's going on, but from what I could see is either there's just not enough money there or the money is being mishandled and could be spent in other ways. I think sometimes we, as a city, we overlook the priorities that's within the city. So I want to ask you, don't go back to the taxpayer and take their money. Most people in Kershaw County that I see is on a fixed income. I know this has already been mentioned. But one of the reasons we moved to Kershaw because it was a decent place to live. The taxes wasn't real bad. So instead of falling back on the taxpayers isn't the answer. Where the answer lies is look for different avenues to get that money to protect these firemen. And that's all I have to say about that. So I just want to thank you for this time.
Thank you, Mr. Sexton. And let me thank the audience, too, for being so courteous to let everybody speak and helping us get through this. We really want to hear from you. Okay, Mr. DeBose?
The next person signed up is Barbara Thomas.
Thank you, Barbara.
The next person signed up is Mike Hancock.
Mr. Hancock?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, council members, and staff. My name is Mike Hancock, and I'm the general manager of the Lugoff-Elgin Water Authority. We're a multi-county special purpose district. We provide water service to over 8,720 taps in West Wateree of Kershaw County, along with parts of Fairfield and Richland. We supply fire protection to most of the area in which we serve. I'm representing the authority and myself as a Kershaw County resident. First of all, I commend you on your efforts to improve the quality of fire protection in Kershaw County. Tonight, I'd like to ask you to make certain all the components of fire protection are fully addressed. I've heard it said that the money we'll be paying to fund the fire protection district should be offset by what we're going to be saving on homeowners insurance. I know that each fire department carries an ISO rating given by the Insurance Services Office. These ratings are the scale by which insurance companies decide how much they're going to charge for their insurance. Each department's ISO rating is based on several weighted factors. 50% of the grade is determined by training, equipment, and location.
All right.
40% of the grade is based on the water supply. The remaining 10% is determined by the communication system. Kershaw County already has a 911 system and communications capability. Now, I looked on the county's website for the study that the Chronicle had referenced, and I believe this gentleman back here a while ago talked about was done in the fall. What I've been able to find is that your plan addresses the location factor and personnel. I've found nothing addressing firefighting water supply. I would hope that we would not send more firefighters into harm's way without one of the fundamental tools necessary to fight fire, and that tool is water. There are many places throughout the county without a fire hydrant nearby. You don't see them everywhere. And that's because a fire hydrant must meet specific requirements. They must provide at least 500 gallons of water a minute at 25 psi or greater. This means that hydrants have to be fed by at least a 6-inch water main. That main must be backed up by water supplied by a standpipe or an elevated tank, and the tank is fed by the water system, which draws its water from a source such as ours we pull from Lake Wateree. As you can see, hydrant requirements are much more involved than most people realize. I would like to know for sure that Kershaw County's water supply system is being considered. At 40% of any fire department's ISO rating, I view it as critical to holding down insurance costs and crucial to protecting the lives of our firefighters and our citizens. The Lugoff-Elgin Water Authority stands ready to assist in your efforts by adding whatever expertise we can to improve the fire protection of our service area. Our citizens and brave firefighters' lives are too important for us not to cover all the bases. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. DeBose.
Next person signed up is Jenny Hernandez.
Mrs. Fernandez.
I'm a senior citizen also. I'm reiterating what some of the others have already said. But I want to let you know that it's getting very difficult to live off of the Social Security check. Every single person that I pay has gone up on me. Everyone. And now I see these fees and I see millage and all these things that you're planning on doing. I think some years ago you imposed a 1% sales tax and promised not to go up on taxes. You see, sirs, I don't know the difference between a fee and a millage and taxes because it's all coming from my income. You know, our governor and our president has it right. Our president gave the senior citizens a little discount on our federal taxes this year. Our governor has said that if we continue at the rate we're going at with taxes, that this country is going to fail, and it is going to fail because I would like to know what the rate of money we're receiving and paying out is equal to in this day and time. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Fernandez. Mr. DeBose.
The next person signed up is Barbara Thomas.
Barbara Thomas. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mr.
The
DeBose.
next person signed up is Albert Huff.
Members of County Council and especially the citizens of Kershaw County, we appreciate y'all showing up. I think like everybody else here, taxes is a sore spot for everybody. And we all want fire protection, so I kind of look for ways where maybe we could tax appropriately without overtaxing. And some of the ways I looked at is I think this resolution with the $25 fees on every vehicle and $25 on each parcel of property are particularly hard on the poor people. And I would recommend that we would do it based on property values more so that because essentially the fire protection service is rewarded for, say if you have $1 million house, they should pay more than somebody that's living in a $30,000 trailer. It just makes sense. But when I looked through it, one of the other things I found particularly burdensome or onerous about this bill was they have a $25 late fee that's equivalent to the amount of the fee. So if you don't pay your fee in 30 days, they tack on another $25, which is basically ridiculous to have a $25 fee and have a penalty of $25. It all screams of, we want to take your money. And I think that's what most people here object to. I think it would be much more appropriate to reduce, if not eliminate, those $25 fees on vehicles and do the fees on your property based on the value of your property. I think you already have the mechanism to do that with the ad valorem taxes. Another item that concerns me is basically it's a huge budget increase, and I understand the fire department needs that money, but I'm not sure the public is aware of how much this budget increase is, because later on you're going to talk about essentially a $2.5 million budget for the fire department, and in addition to this over $2.5 million that we're proposing with fees, which looks like a $5 million budget for the fire department. So some explanation or education, I'm sure, is in order. But I think most people here don't mind paying a fair share. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Well said. Mr. DeBose.
The next person that signed up is Lewis Watson.
Mr. Watkins? I don't see him. Mr. Watkins? We'll come back at the end and maybe we'll get him. Mr. Bose, let's go to the next one and remember Mr. Watkins.
Irving Branham.
Mr. Branham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilman. I'm a landlord, and the reason I'm here today is the people that I have that lease from me, most of them have very limited income. I know I've tried to absorb all the costs that is passed on, to me on the properties that I have, but it's getting to a point that, we're going to have to start increasing rent amounts on these folks. And like I said, for the most part, these people are the ones that really, it hurts the worst. I have the highest regard for the fire department. And I believe that, if they have a need, we need to meet that need. But we need to find a way to do it without continually, tacking on fees. My suggestion is let's commission a study to find out what really needs to be done to help the fire department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Branham. Thank you very much indeed. Mr. DeBose.
Next person signed up is Derek Shoemake.
Mr. Shoemake.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Derek Shoemake. I'm a lifelong Kershaw County resident. My wife is a school teacher here. I'm president of the Kershaw County Bar Association. So we're pretty ingrained in this community. We support the increased fire protection. I think that, since the dawn of the Civil War, fire protection has been a pretty essential service offered by governments. And I think that when you start talking about, even at the most libertarian fundamental piece, what a government is for, a big part of what a government is for is to protect its people. And so adequate fire service is fundamental to that. And so the next question is, well, what does adequate fire service entail? As this county grows, it needs to grow in a way where the fire service is available to protect the citizens. I live just on the other side of the Richland County line, where a lot of the growth in Kershaw is being seen. And again, the growth is astronomical. And what we don't have right now is the resources in place to provide a safety net that is required for these people. And I think if we also look from a fiscal perspective, from a long-term perspective, you see fiscal growth because businesses are more likely to go to a place where they can get adequate fire protection. And the inverse is also true. A business is not going to locate to an area where their entire business can be wiped out by a poor response time. So again, as a lifelong Kershaw County resident, I would support the growth of the fire service to these rural areas, and I'll also echo what the captain said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemake. Mr. DeBose.
Next person signed up is Tom Webb.
Mr. Webb.
To me, it's not just the money, it's the way you're going about it. You got your foot in the door in a rather creative way. You're going to tax something, get a fee on something, and if it ever goes away, the precedent is set. You do it again and again and again. And what's the next step? Well, somebody said you might even tax goats. I got a few. I think there might be some other ways. Somebody said we ought to set up a commission, and I know that the fire people have been involved in that. But you need not just the people that are giving a service, you need the people that are receiving the service to get in there. And I've heard it said that you can't have a referendum. You can't initiate a referendum, but you could initiate the forming of a committee of citizens with some help from the fire departments for us to look into this and see if we can't find some better way to do this. As for myself, we have timberland, and we live in an old heart pine house. If it ever caught fire, there'd be nothing we could do except get out the hot dogs and the marshmallows. So we depend on the State Forestry Commission, and they have been a great help on a couple occasions. Fire that wasn't on our property, but one that was, and And I appreciate that Baron DeKalb fire truck showed up. And I give to them voluntarily. I like to do things voluntarily. It's been said that for 3 years you have been struggling with this, how to fund it. Well, for 3 years ago, you passed an ordinance that does not allow people to solicit from the side of the road to ask for money for something like a fire department. 3 years, for 3 years, you haven't been asking for voluntary contributions. I know that would only be a drop in the bucket, but it might be a pretty big drop after 3 years. That's just one thing that I'm thinking about. And somebody else who is a volunteer fireman suggested that, as with a fire truck showing up at a wreck site, that they can ask for, I guess they have a way to get, some payment out of the liability insurance of the person who's involved in a wreck. Well, why not do the same thing with a fire? If somebody's house is on fire and a fire truck shows up, why not go after the homeowner's insurance or tack on a fee, maybe $100, $200, $300 for showing up at a fire? Let people pay for it as they need it and not go about this thing ahead of time that I think is a step in the wrong direction. It's just part of the big government overlooking the people. I guess that's about enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. DeBose.
Next person that signed up is Angela Huff.
Ms. Huff? She spoke earlier. Okay. Mr. DeBose?
The next person and the last person signed up is Jeff Maddox.
Mr. Maddox. And don't forget, we had one person that we are still looking for, right, Mr. Bose?
Yeah, Lewis Watson.
Mr. Watson. Has he shown up yet? Okay. Mr. Maddox, please, sir.
Guys, tonight's the night. Tonight's the night when we either go for liberty or we go for taxes and fees. Durable good orders are falling off the cliff. Manufacturing is falling off the cliff. Unemployment and real unemployment, somewhere around 20%. Bond market yields are inverted. Money printing causing inflation, which robs our purchasing power every minute of every day. The most dismal job numbers in years just came out. The economic indicators are indicating recession, and yet this council portrays a sunshine and lollipops, everything is wonderful, head in the sand attitude. Inflation is all around us, and our paychecks are not keeping up. Gentlemen, a storm is brewing, and yet we ignore the dark clouds on the horizon. Instead of battening down the hatches, we are steaming ahead as if nothing is wrong. At every level of government, debt is growing, and taxes and fees are rising, robbing even more people who are already living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. Consumer debt is at an all-time high. Housing has been in decline for over 2 years. New car sales are crashing, and student loan debt is off the charts. Yet this council appears to be like the proverbial ostrich with its head in the sand, ignoring it all. Of course, if you watch mainstream media, you are completely unaware of what is actually going on as the politicians and the talking heads pull the wool over your eyes. You see, debt is good in the empire of lies. Yep, sure is. As the price of hamburger is headed to the moon, county council is buying swampland and building mega sites as if the economy is booming. Like drunken sailors, council has been spending as if money grows on trees and the people have printing presses hidden in their garages. Yep, you sure have. Malinvestment is rampant, and free money euphoria has now come to fire protection. This council is practicing the proverbial monkey see, monkey do analogy as you follow the monkeys at the State House and the monkeys in Washington who continue to rack up debt as if debt is the way to prosperity and spending is the juice to get there. Has anyone else noticed this council and councils before have been increasing spending on an average of $1.5 million a year, even if we exclude the increases in taxes and fees? I sure have. Yep, I sure have. Inflation caused by government borrowing and the Federal Reserve money printing, along with fractional reserve lending, is the reason why this county must have more and more money each and every year just to maintain current services. Inflation drives up prices of housing, vehicles, food, and anything else you can think of, including the amount of taxes the people are forced to pay, thus increasing the amount of extortion coming into the county coffers. Most taxes are a percentage of the thing being taxed, so it stands to reason the higher the cost or value of a good, like a house, the more money is taken in by the county, state, and federal governments. Governments love inflation just for this reason alone. If this council wishes to spend even more, they must demand the people pay even more taxes and fees out of our constantly shrinking purchasing power. Council never considers inflation when planning their vision for the county. Instead of trying to protect the people from the devaluation of the dollar, this council exacerbates the theft by increasing taxes and fees to insulate themselves at the expense of the people. Yep, you sure do. People at every turn are being fleeced by the very government that claims to protect them. With every new vision council comes up with, the people get poorer, while government grows and claims to be spending and borrowing for the greater good. Sounds kind of socialist to me. Yep, sure does. Fire protection is just one thing in a long list of things. This council is forcing people to sacrifice yet another chunk of hard-earned paychecks. It is a never-ending cycle of robbing Peter to pay Paul as you follow every other government into the tax, borrow, and spend our way to prosperity con game. This council appears to be playing the monkey see, monkey do game. The monkeys in Washington borrow and spend to the tune of trillions. The monkeys at the State House borrow and spend in the billions. And this council sees their fellow monkeys in taxes, spends, and borrows in the millions. It makes me wonder if the monkeys at the federal and state started jumping out of windows, would our councilmen follow along? If history is any indicator, I'm sure they would line up in front of the window ready to jump. Monkey see, monkey do, all the way to the poorhouse for all. With every tax increase, we are told the tax is just a tiny bit, and yet when added up, all those tiny bits add up to thousands for each family and multi-millions for the people as a whole. This council makes the claim that these new fire protection extortion fees, it's only $25 per vehicle and $25 per parcel of land, as if council has not already raised taxes and fees multiple times over the past several years. But wait, that's not all, folks. Not only is this council raising fees on vehicles and property, they are also increasing the millage for the fire district. That's right, folks. Council is increasing the millage from 9.7 to 24.8. In other words, council is double taxing us as a way around Act 3388, which limits the amount they can increase property tax during a year. Interestingly, council points to how much other governments tax their people as a measurement of how much they should tax us. They also want us to make us feel good by pointing out they are taxing us less than the other monkeys. Don't you see? The more we make, the more you take. 95% of the people top out in pay about age 45. After that, their pay levels out with it while inflation continues to eat. Throw in tax increases and you have a recipe for the poorhouse where you really don't need fire protection because you can't afford a home and you can't afford medicine. Why do you guys hate old people? What do you have against poor people? What about the old woman who had to take a job at McDonald's just to buy her medication and keep the air conditioning running? What would you tell her? Maybe suck it up and skip a few meals. It won't hurt you. Gentlemen, you have no idea the consequences your vision will have on people. You also do not know what might have been had you not stolen the money out of the economy for this plan. Like ripples in a pond, your actions will have ramifications you cannot see. All you can see are firehouses and fire trucks across the fruited plains. So, gentlemen, the economy is headed for recession. Inflation is stealing our purchasing power at every turn. Taxes and fees are out of control. Is it wise to start down this path when all the signs show a storm is brewing? 2008 was just the beginning. What is coming will make the Great Depression look like a cakewalk, and we are unprepared. While you are supposed to be protecting the people, you are instead exacerbating our vulnerabilities. It is time to batten down the hatches before this economic hurricane comes along. You are in charge of the ship. You hold the safety and security of all your passengers in your hands. What will you do? Frederick Bastiat perfectly explained how your vision of fire protection affects the economies in ways that are both seen and unseen, and in his analogy of the broken window fallacy. Bastiat uses a rock thrown through a window to illustrate his point that while government programs are seen, it is what is unseen that is most important. A rock breaks a window of a baker's store, which the baker must repair. The baker hires a glazer to replace the glass. That is what we can see. The glazer is paid by the baker, and in turn, the glazer buys fruit from the farmer. All that we can see. What is not seen is what would have been had the window not been broken in the first place. Perhaps the baker would have spent the money on a new pair of shoes instead of having to repair the broken window. He might have taken his wife out for dinner and bought her a new dress. These are things that we do not see. We cannot see what might have been. The same is true with economic development and fire protection. We cannot see is what might have been if council had not taken the money from the people in the first place. What businesses would have been supported by that money? What businesses might have expanded? These things we cannot see. Just as council cannot see the old woman going without medication or food, council cannot see what people or businesses will be affected by these new series of taxes and fees. Council can only see what it wants to see. If council passes all these fire ordinances, it will not be because they have not been warned, nor will it be they were not informed. No, it will be because council does not have the ears to hear or the eyes to see the warning signs of the impending storm, and will go full steam ahead into the abyss. Tonight is the night you are going to choose. If you believe the talking heads and the people who tell us everything is fine, vote for these taxes. If you do not care about the old woman or the poor people in general, vote for these taxes. If you think freedom is built on socialism and the greater good, vote for these taxes. If you believe the collective has more rights to the individual's labor than the individual, vote for these new taxes. But gentlemen, if you are concerned about the coming economic storm, you will vote against these new taxes. If you are concerned about the old woman at McDonald's missing meals or going without medication, vote no. If you believe the individual has a right to his or her labor, you should vote no to these new taxes. If you believe in liberty for all and individual rights, you must vote against these socialist actions. Give me liberty, gentlemen, or give me more taxes and fees.
Thank you, Mr. Maddox. Mr. DeBose?
That concludes the sign-up list for the public hearing on the fire protection.
And there was the individual that we didn't have, Lewis Watson?
Yes.
Anyone else want to speak on the fire? All right. Someone else? Yeah, come on up. Mr. Steele will close out the public hearings.
We hear a lot about the tremendous growth in the county. And myself and a lot of other people wonder, if we're getting all this growth where we need all this new fire protection, why isn't that growth supporting that additional fire protection needs, okay? Or is it just that we want more fire protection in the whole county, so everybody else has got to pay for it? So some of us just don't understand. Maybe council can tell us what the shortfall is and what the real growth is, all of this new growth is actually producing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steele. And with that, anyone else? Okay, with that, as I said, I would gavel in and gavel out. That closes the public hearing on the fire fee. We go to the second of four public hearings, item number 2, underneath public hearings on the screen, everybody. A public hearing in regard to an ordinance to provide budget appropriations for county purposes in the County Kershaw fiscal year beginning 1 July and ending June 30th next year, 2020, and adopt and implement the charge and collection of services and user rates and fees for other tax purposes and county appropriations. I will open that, but first ask Mr. DeBose, do we have anybody signed up?
One person signed up for the public hearing on the budget ordinance, and that one person is Jeff Maddox.
Mr. Maddox, you're up again, and we open the public hearing again.
Here we go again, gentlemen. Gentlemen, when I address this council, I'm not addressing the individuals, but the collective. I do not question that each councilman has the best intentions in their hearts. I'm sure you do not like being called a thief. I was not saying any of you are thieves outside this chamber. However, as a collective, this council in its deeds has proven to be just that. As a collective, this council, as with every government around the world, claims to have superior rights to which no individual has. As a collective, you can make anything illegal or legal. As a collective, you can take from one and give to another. As a collective, you can force all to comply to your will, no matter the protest of those under your rule. What would happen if you went to a constituent's house armed with a gun, demanding that they give you money for fire protection or economic development? At the very least, you would be labeled a thief, and at the worst, you might die of lead poisoning. Yep, you sure would if it were my house. As a member of the collective, you don't need a gun to personally rob your neighbor. The collective has a legion of enforcers to do the dirty work, every one of them armed with good intentions. Your neighbors have no way to resist the theft, for to do so would ultimately end in their own death. Where do these collective rights come from? Scribbles on paper. Yep, sure do. I am told it is we who give consent to the collective, and it is we who gives this council the right to plunder and dictate our lives. I never consented to any of this. Yet I am told that somehow I did give up some of my liberty to this council along with the state and federal leviathans, yet I can find no legally binding contract to which I am party. If we are government and the government is us, then it only stands to reason that anything the government does, we did to ourselves. The Jews of Nazi Germany were not murdered, but committed suicide, for they were the government. This council is me, and I am this council. When I speak to this council, I am speaking to myself. When this council votes to tax and spend, somehow I did it to myself. Thou shalt not lie, cheat, or steal unless you are a government. Thou shalt not have another God except government. Who is we? Thou shalt not worship idols unless they are government idols. Thou shalt not sacrifice your children unless to government, for government. Gentlemen, can you see there seems to be an exception to the 10 Commandments for this thing we call government? Where does this exception come from? It is my belief that government is the manifestation of Satan through the minds and hands of men. Government is the most evil entity on the earth, without exception. There is no entity on the planet that has killed more people than government. All the murderers throughout history account for only a fraction of what governments have murdered in its name. And yet we believe this is a necessary evil. Why? Who would build the roads? The 10 Commandments only applies to individuals, you see. The 10 Commandments does not apply to a collective of individuals who constitute their own governance called government in whatever form they choose. Why? Who would build the roads? Governments recognize two sets of laws, one for the individual and another for itself. Individuals do not have the right to steal, but government can steal whatever it wants. Why? Who would build the roads? Every council member recognizes he has no right to steal from another individual, yet as a member of the collective, he can vote to steal all from all, yet in his mind, he does not see that theft as such. Instead, he sees the theft as proper and good. Why? Who would build the roads? At the beginning of every council meeting, you pray to God for guidance as you do the people's work. Notice it's not God's work, but the people's work. Why? Who would build the roads? You see, God doesn't build roads. I dare say every council member claims to be a follower of Jesus in his own life. Yet as a collective body, you don't act like Jesus would. Why? Who would build the roads? Satan has no physical power here on earth. Satan can't pick up a rock. He can't pick up a gun, nor can he abort a new life in a womb. Satan can't dig a ditch or build a house or a dam or murder on a massive scale. Nope, sure can't. Satan is helpless without the minds and hands of men. We call government the necessary evil. Why? Who would build the roads? What happens to men when they accept they must use evil to do good? Evil consumes and controls their every action, deceiving them that the evil they do is good for all. Why? Who would build the roads? When we accept that evil is necessary, then evil, government, becomes the means to solve every problem as we see in every action this council takes. We must do this evil thing for the good of all. Why? Who would build the roads? Thou shalt not steal except for government. Why? Who would build the roads? Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He hath been a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, then he speaketh he of his own. For he is a liar and the father thereof. John 8:44, the 1599 Geneva Bible. This scripture is a perfect description of government where evil is necessary for the good of all, which in fact is a lie. All government constituted by man is in fact born from the father of lies, and the deeds of its father it shall do. We accept this evil as being necessary, and we pledge our allegiance to it even as we recognize it be under God's ultimate rule. We claim this evil to be blessed by God and not evil at all. We claim Uncle Sam is God's chosen to rule over us all. What Uncle Sam does is as if God has done. What Uncle Sam does is as God has done. This government claims to be a child of God, yet acts like the child of Satan. What is wrong for the government, what is wrong for the individual is right for government. We all know government is a liar. Every person in this chamber knows this is true. We all know government is a thief. Every person in this chamber knows this is true. We all know government is evil. Gentlemen, are we going to continue to do the deeds of our father, the devil, or shall we turn away from the evils and place our faith in the Lord? I see my time is running short, and so I'll end by saying, gentlemen, as individuals, we are equal, but once elected, you become something else. As a collective, this body works for the father of lies. We will continue this conversation later.
Thank you, Mr. Maddox. Anyone else on the budget? I would remind you that the way we're supposed to do this is you're supposed to talk to the topic at hand, which is the budget. Is any further on the budget? With that, I'll close this hearing, and we'll move to the next of 4 hearings, item number 3. And I would ask Mr. DeBose to respond in a moment. A public hearing in regard to an ordinance setting the millage rate for Kershaw County for that same fiscal year, beginning 1 July 2019 and ending 30 June 2020. And I would ask you to keep your comments focused on the topic. Mr. DeBose, anybody signed up?
Mr. Chairman, one person signed up, and that one person is Jeff Maddox.
Mr. Maddox.
I'm excited.
As I said, gentlemen, we'll carry on this conversation. Kershaw County Council will be voting this Tuesday to raise taxes and fees on all kinds of land. And gentlemen, tonight you're going to have to decide whether you're going to take the money out of the people's hands to build this dream when everybody out here is struggling paycheck to paycheck. Economic signs are showing recession everywhere. Is this the time to do this kind of thing? I know you think it's an emergency, and maybe fire protection needs some help. But instead of spending on the land down here at the now flooded river, or spending it in other places like the mega site and borrowing millions, that money could have been spent on fire protection. It seems like to me we also have a surplus which could be used to supplement some. Perhaps we could even go around and do like people used to do and ask for donations for a little bit of help. But this borrow and spend and tax and spend while we continually fight off inflation. And inflation in real terms, look at what the price of ribeyes were 10 years ago. Look at the price of trucks 10 years ago. And look at what you have now. And you've been gaining money every year. It's just like somebody said, all these houses that are coming in, that has money coming into the coffers too now. But it seems like every year you spend a little bit more, and then you add a little bit of tax. For a couple of years there, it was $50 a house. I think probably now it's probably $150 a house now. So you continually put pressure on everybody and then expect us to just enjoy it. It doesn't work that way. I just ask that you consider that this may not be the way. We might need to think outside the box a little bit. We don't need to follow everybody else, because look at where they're going. They're going, look at the debt, $23 trillion, and that's just what they tell us. Look at the state. The state is running all kinds of deficit. Debt everywhere. If we just continually run into debt, what are we going to run into? We're going to run into a brick wall, and then everybody out here is going to be in the poorhouse. Let's just Think about this a little bit. I think we can do a lot better if we do it in a voluntary manner. That's the way Jesus would have done it. He wouldn't have come to these people and said, give me your damn money. No, we're supposed to work together. We're supposed to love each other. We're supposed to care for each other. And if there's a need in the community, we're supposed to go and the good ideas will garner support. The bad ideas are things that you got to force people to do. This is just not right. I've said enough. Good night.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Mr. DeBose, which one of you signed? Yes, ma'am. Please come up and identify yourself.
There's something else. He's talking about taxing the people. And once you get to the point where we're being taxed over 50% or 60% of our income, that don't pay to work. And you're going to have people stop them working and give up, and you're losing. You're going to lose any way it goes. Either way, you lose.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Mr. Bose, what's the next hearing here? Number four?
The fourth and last hearing.
All right, let me close that out. If there's no one else, that ends the public hearing on the budget and the millage and the fire fee. We'll move to item number 4. How many people have signed up for item number 4?
Item number 4, 3 people signed up.
All right, let me just make sure you understand what you signed up for. Item number 4 is a public hearing in regard to an ordinance amending and restating Chapter 13 of our regulations for public utilities. If Mr. DeBose will call out the names, we'll see if you are in the right spot. Mr. DeBose?
The first person that signed up is Verlene Jones, but I believe she's left.
Okay.
The second person that signed up is Barbara Thomas.
And she left.
Okay. The third person that signed up is Wesley Crowley.
And
Crowley.
And I don't believe Wesley is here.
And that concludes the sign-up list.
Okay, well, let me open the hearing and see if anybody wants to come forward on public utilities. The hearing is open. And you want to come forward on public utilities? Yes, ma'am. Please come on forward.
My name is Faye Haynes. My husband and I and both of our families have lived in Kershaw County all of our life. And I would like to say, just make a few comments. I don't know what 13 is. So after I sit down, if you could explain what Chapter 13 is, I would appreciate it. And
I'll just make it clear for everybody. It's some administrative changes directed by, I think, the EPA or DHEC to one of our regulations about how we manage, I think, sewer and things of that nature, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir. It's affecting the limits that are allowed to be discharged through treatment.
It's the discharge limits into the Wateree River and so on. Okay?
And just a few more comments, and I sure hate Mr. Maddox left. And I have to say this, and I know I'm not supposed to. I'm supposed to be talking about number 4. Unemployment is not at the lowest level. It is at the lowest level that it has been for years. We are not in a recession. People need to understand this. Government is not evil. People are evil. And the council, sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. But you give us the opportunity to come before you and express our ideas and our concerns and comments. And I appreciate that, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Now, as we come to the end of the public hearing, if y'all feel compelled to leave, we'll move now into an agenda, just so I can explain to everybody. But as you leave, you ought to see the new pumper truck we have out there, because and it's very important for our wonderful firefighters that they have a pumper truck, especially in the rural areas. And this truck is from where? Cassett?
Wessel?
Westwood.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Well, let me close the public hearings. And we'll move now to the next item on the agenda, which is adoption of the agenda. You guys good to keep moving?
Yes, sir. Make a motion to adopt the agenda as submitted.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Gardner. Any discussion on the agenda? Yeah, Mr. Bozard.
Yes, I have an item on a new business. I'd like to remove that, please, due to the fact that we're running time and we're going to be here for some time. We'll put it on next time.
We have an amendment to the budget, item number 2 under new business. Do we have a second to remove that item?
Second.
From Mr. Snodgrass, discussion?
Yes, just due to time we have and so forth, I'll put it on next time. Mary, if you'll put it on next time for me, please.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? Seeing there is none, let's move. I will make one vote. We have an executive session tonight, one on the detention center, and a second item on the airport contract. So just so you budget your time, gentlemen. With that, we move to a vote. All those in favor signify on the amendment to the budget. To the agenda. All right, very good. And the amendment is approved. Now can we move to the budget as amended? The agenda as amended. All those in favor, raise your hands. And it's amended and approved, and the agenda will go forward. Thank you, Mr. Bozard. We needed that time. With that, we move to a proclamation, Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Mr. Tucker, if you'll make the motion, I'll read it. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I would like to make a motion that we approve this proclamation for the Elder Abuse Awareness. It's supposed to be the month of June for this day. And I also would like to recognize that Mr. Bruce Little from the Council on Aging is here. Is
Bruce here?
Yes, sir. He's right there.
I don't see his bald head anywhere. All right. Hey, Bruce. All right, very good. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Stand by, Bruce, and we'll read this proclamation. Second from Mr. Snodgrass?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, let me read it, and then we'll have discussion. Whereas older adults deserve to be treated with respect and dignity to enable them to serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and vital participants of our community. And whereas in 2006, the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, in support of the United Nations, proclaimed a day to recognize the significance of elder abuse as a public health and human rights issue. And whereas June 15th marks the 13th annual World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, its recognition will promote a better understanding of abuse and neglect of older adults. And whereas the National Center on Elder Abuse and Kershaw County recognize the importance of taking action to raise awareness, and whereas our population lives longer, we are presented with an opportunity to think about and recognize our collective needs and future as a nation. And whereas ageism and social isolation are major causes of elder abuse, and whereas recognizing that it's up to us all to ensure that proper social structures exist so people can retain community and societal connections, reducing the likelihood of that abuse. And whereas preventing abuse of older adults through maintaining and improving social supports like senior centers, human services, and transportation will allow everyone to continue to live as independently as possible. And whereas where there is justice, there can be no abuse. Therefore, we urge all people to restore justice by honoring older adults, and whereas all should join us in engaging and empower in movement and putting an end to such abuse. Now, therefore, we, Kershaw County, do hereby proclaim June 15th as Elder Abuse Awareness Day and encourage all our communities to recognize and celebrate older adults. With that, any further discussion? Thank you for bringing that forward, Mr. Tucker from the Santee Lynch's cause. With that, let's move to a vote. All those in favor, so signify. And it's unanimous. And Bruce, would you come forward? And if you'd like to say a few words, we would be certainly welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, other members of the council. We appreciate the recognition, but most of all, as members of the Kershaw County Council on Aging, we appreciate the recognition, and we also appreciate the protections. It is unfathomable about how many seniors that we have in our county that do suffer from elder abuse. And sometimes a lot of it comes from family members. But only through your open eyes, your open hearts, and also your open wallets do these members of these families still continue to survive and still continue to prosper here in Kershaw County. It is indeed an all-American city. That's a county. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you very much indeed, Bruce, for the work you do. Okay, we move to the next item, which is approval of minutes dated 28 May. It's at tab B, and it's on the screen. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Mr. Gardner, a second? Second from Mr. Bozard. Discussion? Seeing there is none, we move to a vote. All those in favor of the minutes, please signify by raising your hand. And it's unanimous, Mary, and we can proceed with that.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
All right. We now move into the meat of the discussion after having now heard from the people of our county over the last 3 weeks, and for the ad hoc committee led by Mr. Connell, Mr. Gardner, and Mr. Jones. We now move into the actual voting. The first item is an ordinance at tab C. You got it up, Danny? Yep. Third reading of an ordinance by Kershaw County Council to place into effect service and user fees for rates and charges for the furnishing of fire protection services within the fire protection district of Kershaw County as authorized by ordinances creating the fire protection district of Kershaw County. Can we have a motion to approve? Mr. Connell?
I'll make that motion.
A second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Tucker. Very good. For discussion, I turn to Mr. Snodgrass. Do you want to open us up?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, members of council, I have a motion. I'd like to make a motion to amend on third reading of the ordinance to place into effect service and user fees in the Fire Protection District in accordance with the ordinance that I am handing out now.
And after we get it out, we'll read it, if that's all right. I'm going to mark it as 11 June amendment, okay? All right, sir. Can you summarize the motion?
Sure. This motion is going to be a motion to eliminate fees on vehicles, and we'll place a fee of $29 on improved parcels only.
And let me just further that. Will that delete from the amendment, the previously approved second reading, fees on unimproved property?
It will eliminate fees on unimproved property as well.
Let me restate that and see if I got it right. The amendment will remove all fees on vehicles for the purposes of fire. It will impose a $29 fee on improved parcels and delete the fee on unimproved parcels. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Connell. Mr. Snodgrass, would you lead us in discussion?
Sure. So, last few weeks, it's been a process of how government works. You know, everything's got 3 readings and things move forward, and it allows council time to get feedback from the citizens, and that's what I've been doing. I've been getting feedback from the citizens, and I've never been excited about the proposal that came to us, but moved forward with it, knowing that there were probably creative ways in which we could look at this. And so over the last few weeks, I've asked staff as well as other council members to think more creatively about this, to maybe go back to the beginning and take a relook at some things. Vehicles already have a $35 road fee on them, and it really hurt me to think about putting another fee on a vehicle. And so as we've been working with staff, we've got the math worked out, and we'll explain more of that. There's another amendment that's going to go along with this, but I feel very strongly about this amendment, and the math works out that the fire plan will be able to be implemented fully as proposed by the ad hoc committee with this amendment. And I think that's very important for me to indicate that the ad hoc committee's proposal will continue on time, on track, even with these changes.
Other comments? Mr. Connell, I should have recognized you first. Go ahead.
Don't worry about it. Danny, could you pull that slide up? So I just want to talk, not that one. That one. Yep, that's the one. I want to talk briefly about why we're even talking about fire service. So I couldn't have asked for a better person to stand up than what we heard from Brian Spitzer. I haven't known him since we had the ad hoc committee, but his comments were spot on tonight. You have a row of people in the back of the room tonight, and some of them standing around. We have several volunteers here who are willing to risk their lives to go into your house, and they volunteer to do that. They get reimbursed generally, but they basically volunteer their time. And that's a system that we've worked under for decades in Kershaw County. People drop what they're doing when they get toned out, and they try to come to your house or your vehicle if it's on fire and try to save you or your family's lives. On August 22nd, 2017, an ad hoc committee was created by this council, and the chairman in particular. We commenced a study that was comprised of numerous volunteer firefighters, full-time firefighters, community members, and local leaders. That committee led to a report that we had in October, and we actually got perspectives from the West Watery area and the East Kershaw County area to understand what the fire needs were in each of those areas. And they generated this report that was all discussed in public meetings. People were able to come up and make comments and otherwise contribute or join the committee if they wanted to. We had a couple people that found out about it and wanted to join in later so that they could contribute and comment. After we got the initial report from that ad hoc committee, the conclusions were primarily threefold. We needed to reorganize our volunteer fire service to account for volunteer retention rates, recruitment, and the control span so that we actually had a little bit better control of training and implementation of our best practices in Kershaw County. The second recommendation was we need to get better technology to track our data more accurately. And then the third one was we needed to figure out basically how to fund full-time fire service because of some of the issues we heard about originally, which was it takes about 208 hours or so to train a volunteer fireman. That's if I took every Saturday for the next year and said, I'm gonna take 4 hours away from my family, I might just be trained if they're offering the classes at that time. So you can't find younger people who are willing to do that unless we get to them in high school. And that's something I'll talk about a little bit later because they can go through certain high school programs and become fully certified volunteers by the time they graduate. And that's one of the ways that we've got to get them in the program. So those were the three recommendations in late 2017. This council adopted those recommendations, and we acted on two of them already. We reorganized the structure and kind of streamlined it. And then the second thing we did was we got the computers and technology and tracking systems that we needed to more accurately see and have true data on what fire service calls we're doing. We've heard tonight about the population growth throughout the county. It's not just in Elgin or Blaney, where I represent primarily, but it's all over the place. And now what we're here tonight about, for context, is how do we fund full-time fire service? Well, we've got this slide up. I have a business in Lugoff. I appreciate the Lugoff Fire Department, and just by coincidence, we're actually going to be talking about their budget tonight and new business and voting on that. They have about 8,000 residents that they protect with $1.3 million. You can see the calls on the screen. Camden's got a $2 million budget for about 8,500 people. The volunteer fire system has about $1.2 million for 46,000 people. We've been getting free labor for an extended period of time, and the growth has continued such that that just can't continue without overtaxing, overstressing our volunteers. I don't think it was hyperbole or over an exaggeration whenever Brian Spitzer got up here and said, we've got a real problem. We've been looking at it for 3 years and trying to get the data so we could bring it to the people and let you know what we're basing these decisions off of. After that, just to know the timeline and that the public's had every opportunity to be involved, it was advertised. We've had budget meetings. It's been published on social media, but in January of 2019, we had a Kershaw County Fire Service report that came to us about how we could possibly fund full-time fire service. You might ask, what happened between the gap of late 2017 and 2019? We implemented the technology so that we could track the data and see what the actual calls were and where the need was. We tracked that data for a year. That resulted in this report in early 2019. After that, we had public budget meetings over the last few months where we talked about it further. What are possible mechanisms for funding full-time fire service? The reason I like this amendment is it gets away from unimproved parcels. Yes, you could have a wildfire and there are issues there, but it gets away from the $25 fee on unimproved parcels. It gets away from a $25 fee on vehicles, and it moves to a $29 fee on improved parcels, so where your actual house is. The overall cost for what's proposed tonight will be less than what you would pay if you're in Lugoff Fire District or Camden Fire District, and it'll move us towards 2 full-time fire stations, one at Blaney, where we have the most calls, and then soon after that, one in the eastern portion of the county, proposed location in Cassett, that would work as a hub and spoke system to rotate out to the various fire stations that need coverage. I didn't hear anybody tonight in our public hearings or comments otherwise say that this council, this body, doesn't have a responsibility to provide fire protection. Everybody basically said, yeah, we want fire service. It's just how we're going to pay for it, or we don't like to pay for it, and I agree. I would rather keep my dollars to fund my children's educations, which I appreciated Mr. Kirkland's comments. Both of my girls go to Dobie's Mill, but I view this as a need and not a want. We've got a volunteer system, which God bless y'all in the back. I'm not making fun at all, but the average age is increasing. We're not getting younger and younger volunteers into the system, and those are the people that are supposed to rush into your home and save you, or your children if you're out of town. I heard someone comment tonight that you could just let your structure burn down and that's why you have fire insurance. I'm talking about saving lives. You know, you can't let the house burn down if your family is involved, and that's one of the main problems is the volunteers, whether they work in Sumter, Richland, or Fairfield County, or other locations, have to leave their job and then try to come and respond to these emergent calls. This proposal also would increase the point system you heard referenced tonight to support the volunteers by over 30%, and that's a significant bump. I agree with some of the comments I heard tonight about needing to improve what is defined as a fire call, and also recruitment, which I mentioned through high school and otherwise. Those are other issues we need to address. But the one before us tonight is how do we actually fund the personnel that we need to respond to the fire calls that we're seeing due to growth? Mr. Chairman, that's all I have right now.
Other comments, please. Mr. Tucker.
I'm going to yield to Mr. Bozard.
You want to yield? Okay,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bozard, fire away.
I'd like to get a little clarification on what we're talking about. We're talking about anything that we do. We put a barn on it. We put a tractor shed on it. This is what you're talking about besides houses?
Sure. The assessor defines an improved parcel as any sort of building or structure.
Chicken houses.
Yeah.
Let me refer you to page, just interrupting for a
Yes.
moment. On page 2 of what you have in front of
Correct.
you, at paragraph 1A is the definition. Okay,
Can you read
back to
that?
you,
Yeah,
David.
an improved parcel of land is a parcel of land which a main structure, secondary structure, such as a yard item or mobile home, is situated upon or has been constructed, erected, or placed. And I will say there is some farmland that is classified as unimproved. So in fact, if you're curious, if you go to the GIS website, you can pull up your property and then it gives you all that data. And
is that helpful?
Is that?
Yeah, I read that, what you pointed out, but
Yeah.
it still didn't specify. So anything we improve on the property is going to be taxed.
Structure.
We got a piece of land on it.
Yeah, theoretically that would change a unimproved parcel to an improved parcel.
But to be clear, not anything. I mean, you couldn't dig a ditch, and that's not a structure. That's a structure.
It's structure.
Or bush hog it, that's not a structure.
Just because you bush hog it don't mean it's improved. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Back to you, Mr. Tucker. You are next up.
Yes, sir. I've got a couple people I want to thank. I want to thank to my
You're
right,
welcome.
my counterpart. Say again? You're welcome. Yeah, always there, Mr. Jones. My counterpart, Mr. Snodgrass and staff for chipping away at this, ensuring that we come up with something different. I think a lot of you called in to your respective council members, and some of you called in to all of us. I want to thank Mr. Mac McLeod. If you sit down and call your council members sometime and have an honest conversation and don't get on the phone cussing and yelling and acting like a fool, you might can have a decent conversation with them and get what is to be the facts. And I say that because I also sat down with Mr. Tom Webb. We ate breakfast together and broke bread and talked and had a good conversation. You just have to contact people and get the correct and the factual information. Whether you agree or disagree, at least you would have an understanding, because we have done this study. I heard a lot of stuff up here in this open comment section and in the public hearing that was just false. It wasn't true. I'm going to also pass along to Mr. Ray and Mr. Carpenter that, in my conversations with Mr. McLeod came some good ideas on how to incentivize when these young men and women take time out of their busy schedules to get this 200 plus hours. What are we rewarding them with? Is there anything for them to take a vacation day or a day off from work with no pay to go get their hours that they need so they can look forward to graduating, and then you incentivize them so they can stay? It's only once time certification, right? They don't get certified every year. They may get recertified. We ain't gonna award them for doing their jobs, but that's an incentive for young people to come up and want to stay in the fire service and keep fighting. We got a lovely county. I love living here. Both my parents born and raised here. I'm not moving anywhere else. You're gonna have to carry me out in a box or even in an iron. I don't know how they're gonna do me yet, but however they do me, it's gonna be all right with me. But I just want to say that I commend the ones that came up with this idea. I wholeheartedly support it. There's no taxes on your cars, your mopeds, your mules, your donkeys, your goats. You don't have none of that. You just have your improved structures. And this is a temporary fix. No one said that to get it clear, because the question was asked. This is a temporary fix because we were not able to do it by millage. The most fair and supporting way is by millage, which we cannot do because of Act 388. Our hands are tied. And that's why it's not there now. If it wasn't for Act 388, then we can do it a more fair way, less burdensome on everyone, and then you would feel less impact. This is a temporary fix where we can work with our delegation and move forward with Act 388. And it's not double taxation. If the millage goes approved, you will lose your fees. Fees will be rescinded. Thank you.
I need to give somebody else a chance. Any other discussion? Mr. Snodgrass, go ahead.
Yeah, just another point of clarification, just because I think it helps when we see this thing in real numbers. I did several case studies on taxpayers that I spoke to. So I went to the GIS, and you can look up a taxpayer. It shows you all the parcels they own and where it's at. So I did a case study because this is how important this issue was to me. I hope people realize that I understood and I saw the burden that this would create. But at the same time, I heard and I understood our firemen who are saying this is a dire need and we need help. And so because of that, I was committed to try to find some sort of middle ground in which the taxpayer doesn't feel like they're being gouged, but at the same time, the fire service is getting the tools that they need to save our lives. And so this is why I worked so diligently and hard on this. Even while I was at Disney World last week, I've got scratch notes of counting numbers on Walt Disney logoed pads while my family was sleeping. I was crunching these numbers because this is how important it was to me to do this work for the citizens of Kershaw County and the fire service. And so I did this case study, and under the original plan, the two taxpayers that I did a case study on, under the original plan of 25, 25, and 25, one taxpayer was going to pay upwards of $900. Man, that made me hurt. The other taxpayer was going to pay upwards of $700. Again, and that made me hurt. Under this plan, taxpayer one, the $900 taxpayer, is going to pay about $200. Taxpayer two is going to come down to about $180 as far as the burden. And I feel like that helps us a year. I feel like that helps us get a better perspective on what this amendment is doing, and it's easier to talk about real numbers. Another thing that helps this plan, someone asked, well, our county's growing, how come it's not paying for itself? Well, guess what it is? Because our county is growing, the value of our mill is going up. And so a part of this plan working is the fact that county staff went back and we re-examined the value of our mill, and we found out, guess what? The value of our mill is a lot more, is more than what we thought it was 6 months ago as we reevaluated that. And we've got confirmation from our auditor. So I would contend that the growth of our county is helping us pay for itself, if you will, as the value of property grows as a result of the growth that's taking place in this county. So thank you.
Other comments? Yes. Mr. Bozard, please, sir.
I'd like to ask Mr. Carpenter a question. This $29, Mr. Carpenter, is this going to foot all the bill?
No, sir, it's not.
Where's the rest of the money coming from?
I think, as Ms. Snodgrass said later on, there will be another motion made to address the remaining balance of it.
Say again?
There will be another motion made to address the remaining balance.
When we get to item 3 on our agenda under business, we'll be discussing the fire millage.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Jones has his hand up, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, thank you very much. Mr. Snodgrass, or Mr. Carpenter, whoever can answer this question, $29 on any new structure or existing structure?
Every existing structure.
Correct. Okay, so if they have...
Not every structure on the property. I just want to make sure we clear that up.
I'm getting there. Bear with me. $29 will be on any existing or new separate structure on the property other than the primary residence?
No, sir. Just every parcel that has any structure on it, whether it has one structure or 10, if it's a parcel, it'll be $29.
Right.
Thank you.
So we've been listening to the people, and that's why we've changed this.
Council asked that we look at it, and we...
Okay. If this amendment doesn't pass tonight, the $25 amendment that was originally on the table at the last meeting, with I call it a stackable fee, 25 on whatever, all the parcels of land. Didn't we find out right before this meeting that we can't do that?
We can do it, it's just when it's
collected. We couldn't collect.
Well, we can collect it, it's just when you collect it.
We just couldn't get it in time.
We would not start collecting on some of them in the first month or two.
My question is, if this amendment doesn't pass, there's nothing we can do to get any money in, because that $25 fee, we cannot enact it as quick as we thought, correct?
On vehicles, correct.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This is why I need your help tonight, Mr. Jones.
So I guess I'm trying to get a clear understanding. I understand we listen to the people, that's why we're reducing this, but yet we also found out this afternoon that the $25 fee we can't collect it in time to do anything. So now if we do this amendment, we will get some money in immediately, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And the other was an opinion. Someone gave me their opinion.
Well, I want to thank our treasurer. Our treasurer, we got one of the finest treasurers in the state of South Carolina. I think she brought that to our attention this afternoon, that this fee we wanted to enact, we would not be able to collect in a timely fashion to do what we wanted to do.
Not for a full 12 months, that's correct.
And that's the reason we're not doing the millage, because it would take a full 12 months.
No.
For it to come in. Let me ask you this. The fire district, excuse me, I've got the floor. The fire district, the tax district we're in now, this is what's going to support what we do tonight, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. We talk about in a year, I think there's some plans to do a new tax district, correct? In about 12 months?
I believe that.
To change it over to millage?
That has been discussed by council. It's not
Okay.
been decided, been discussed.
So by doing this, it just lets us get money now.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, whereas we would rather do the millage, but we need to wait a year so we can circumvent Act 388 and have that one-time startup fee, 14, 20 mills, whatever we may need at that time. Correct?
I can't speak on council's opinions, but
I know, but that's what we've been discussing. Correct? Yes.
yes, sir.
All right. Bear with me, Mr. Chairman. On the running of the numbers with the $29 fee, how quick can you enact that, and how much are you projecting? And where's the rest of the money coming from?
The $29 fee, Mr. Jones, would be collected in this budget year, and it would be used to pay for bills from this budget year. Again, taxes are collected off of properties, and January 15th is the deadline for them. So we wouldn't collect everything on the first day, obviously. We'd have to go months before that would come in, like all of our budget. So we would have to use the reserves to pay the bills as we go forward until we collect that money that comes in, like, again, the rest of the county budget operates. As far as the rest of the money is concerned, there's been a discussion of of increasing the millage under the limits allowed by Act 388.
But there's also been discussion about creating a new tax district and then having the startup millage so we can sort of.
Well, not for this year, no, sir.
No, but for next year.
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. And this is a vote on the amendment. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other comments? Yeah, Mr. Connell.
I just remembered one call as I was sitting here. I did have someone that typically tunes in online or watches the recordings, and they were concerned with the fee lasting forever, or it always being there. So some government fees starting and never going away. Well, the reason we're not able to do the mill, which I think is more equitable overall, which would be based off, say, the value of a $100,000 house. If the house is more expensive, as some folks mentioned tonight, the fee would graduate with the value. So you pay a little bit more if your house is worth more. Under Act 388, which is a state law, it limits what we can do with the mill at this time. So we couldn't fund, we might be able to get one or possibly two full-time firemen by increasing the mill all the way. There are ratios that are required for responding to fire calls. You have to have a certain number of people show up in order to be able to go in the house, and someone's on the hose, someone's outside in case something bad happens inside with the firemen inside to drag somebody out. And in order to try and comply with those ratios as best as we can, including supplementing with volunteers, this is the number that we've come to. We wouldn't be able to fund it under Act 388 millage increases. So that's why we're looking at a fee. I just want to make that clear. And I'm committed to working towards making it a fire mill, and as Mr. Tucker said, getting rid of this fee. But this is what we need to do the first year. We have issues under Act 388 we need to work through with Town of Elgin, which is its own municipality, and also the Town of Bethune, which is its own municipality. And they have to get some opinions themselves on Act 388 and fire coverage. But we're working on that. We are working on that. So as Mr. Jones mentioned, the options are either you can create a new tax district that would allow you to have the millage in place to fund fire, just through millage, or you can obtain some type of legislative relief, which we're also trying to do, that would allow you to account for, outside of Act 388, account for millage increases that would take care of public safety issues and fire service like this. Thank you,
Other
Mr. Chairman.
comments? I think, Mr. Tucker.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Cornell. I want to give some clarity on if the county's growing, how come the fees don't support itself? A fee is something that is set and that it has no growth mechanism. A millage has a growth mechanism. Now, what do I mean by that? As the county value grows, the millage grows. So you're right. As people move in, they pay more taxes, we get more industry, more jobs, everything elevates itself up. A fee is just flat. So the more people you got sucking on that system and no fees are increasing, then it goes backwards. Your solid waste fee is going backwards already. Many of you probably didn't know that, and I probably shouldn't tell you that, but it has. It's been supplemented out of general fund. But you can read it, it's public information, because it's not enough. That's what a fee does, and that's why I'm not committed to staying with a fee, because it will not sustain the fire service that we need for the future. Now, someone said, well, they're moving in. I have been up here for a long time, and I have talked to them almost blue in the face. If you want to be equitable to the people moving in, have impact fees. When you come in, you pay your fair share and you move into the county, and it doesn't burden the people that has been paying for the many, many years. That's a fair way to do things. Charleston has it, Rock Hill has it, Mount Pleasant has it, and I'm not going to begin to explain how much their impact fees are, but they work, and they don't heavily burdensome the people that have been here with the service, working with the service. So just fruit for thought.
Mr. Jones, right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Tucker, you opened it up, so I'm going to bring up this situation that you just mentioned about the solid waste fee. It's not paying for itself. Well, back in 2012, the solid waste fee was paying for itself. It was in the general fund. Council got the neat idea that we'd go ahead and pull that portion out of the general fund, and there was no money for it. So therefore, we needed to create a fee to pay for it, because we are no longer paying for it in the general fund. I called it a bait and switch. Simple and plain as that. So, and $80 is not enough. I think it started off $25, went to $50. I've never known government to do away with a fee or a tax. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other comments? All right, I'm ready to call the question on this amendment. I'll restate it. The amendment is very well stated it removes the fee for vehicles. It imposes a $29 fee on improved parcels by parcel, and it deletes the fee on unimproved parcels. With that, move to a vote. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Tucker, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Burns, and Mr. Connell. Those opposed, so signify. Mr. Bozard and Mr. Jones. The motion passes and is amended. Ready to accept any other amendments before we move on to the next item?
You got a budget.
You need to do the motion.
Motion as amended, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry?
You need to do the ordinance.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
But I'm waiting to see if there's any other amendments. There are none. With that, we move to the item as amended. All those, can we move straight to a vote?
You need a motion.
Need a motion, please? Mrs. Snodgrass?
Yeah, I move that we adopt third reading of the ordinance to place into effect service and user fees for the fire protection service as amended.
All right. Can we have a second, Mr. Connell? A second by Mr. Connell. Any further discussion?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Council. First off, let me say I've been a volunteer fireman. I've been a member of the rescue squad. I've been a full-time fireman. I've been in law enforcement. Pretty much involved with public service all my life. The lives of our citizens and our firefighters are absolutely priceless. and I want the best fire protection for Kershaw County that we can have. Nothing I've seen or heard tonight or previously demands that we pass third reading right this minute. There is a sense of need, but not an overwhelming urgency for us to rush into this decision based on what I consider incomplete information. I propose we step back and take another look at this issue. As we've heard tonight, there are more things that need to be considered. I never heard anything about fire hydrants in our ad hoc committee study and their requirements until tonight. I don't see the water supply addressed anywhere in our plan. The fire services implementation plan should be a thoroughly researched, comprehensive document. What we have here now is incomplete, insufficient to meet the needs of Kershaw County. I want to know how the user fees will be used to cover all our firefighters' needs. I want to see specific line item allocations. I feel the inadequacy of this plan is why we need to stop third reading. We need to go back and address the entire scope of fire protection. The citizens of Kershaw County deserve better than a rush, piecemeal approach to such an important service. My constituents, which is the entire county, I don't represent just District 4, I represent this entire county. They should have specific documentation to answer their questions. Specifically, they ask why and what purpose does more money need to come out of their pockets? Why does more money need to come out of their pocketbooks? I want the taxpayers of Kershaw County to have the final say in this. I made a promise. And anyone who said and participated knows that I said, I promise we're going to do a referendum. We're going to take it to the people. That's what I was committed to. I feel like that promise was made to the citizens of a referendum, and I feel like we need to live up to that promise by having that referendum. And I want to end with just another short statement. Bear with me. And this is where I stand. I voted against these big fees on second reading, only to find out that those big fees can't be implemented. So they need this amendment. And I will vote against the fees now. I stated my reasons for voting against these big fees, which haven't changed. Like Mr. Carpenter said, and I commend him for this, fees are regressive and hurt the people who cannot afford them. And a lot of people will pay more in fees than taxes. Fees are nothing but a tax in disguise. And this absolutely includes many people on fixed incomes. And I just don't think this is a good way to proceed. I don't think this is well thought out. Not well thought out on how to pay for full-time firemen anyway. There is no emergency in my book. I've talked to 2 premier chiefs, and we've got hardworking firemen. They work hard. They run the calls hard. But I just don't. If there's an emergency now, then there's been an emergency for the last 10 years, the last 5 years. We need to go to the referendum, as I promised people we'd do, and I stand by that. And, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Bozard.
Yes, thank you. Until this past week when I met with Lugoff Water District, I was not aware that we have so many areas in Kershaw County that does not have water. In fact, right above my house on Longtown Road, before you get to Pine Grove, from there all the way to the county line, there's no water. When you turn on Shivers Green Road, right or left, and go either way, about 8 miles, there's no water. In talking with Mike at the Water District office, he tells me that everything east of I-20 does not have water. So my question again is, how are we going to get water to these fires if we got the fires I heard maybe we get bigger trucks. I don't agree with that. I had so many calls within the last 2 weeks from the citizens, and just in the last 2 days alone, over 75 calls asking me not to vote for this and put it on a referendum. And I agree with Mr. Jones. It was first suggested that when the ad hoc committee was established, there was a possible referendum. And I think that's what most of the people thought was coming. And I'll stay with that. And Mr. Chairman, I think we still need to give the people what they want and give them a referendum. Thank you.
You know how to do that if you want to make a motion.
Yes, I will make that motion.
And let's hear it fully stated, please. A referendum when, please?
We have, yes, sir, let me finish, please, sir.
Go ahead.
We have said that it would take 3 years, but we don't have to wait 3 years. We can spend about $75,000 to have a special election and have it next year.
No, I just need to have the stated referendum,
Yes,
and then we can discuss
I'll
it.
state my referendum, motion that we do have a referendum as the people has asked for.
Very good. Can we have a second?
I'll second that for
All right.
discussion.
Any discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Bozard.
Yes, thank you very much. It's been discussed in some of our discussions that we was having with each other over the time that it would take 3 years, and probably that's true. I don't know all the legal terms and formalities about getting something done. But, however, we could spend the money and have a special election, as I've been told could be done.
Very good. Mr. Jones, you have the second. Any comments?
Yes, sir. First off, I second that because I wanted to let Mr. Bozar speak. But, Mr. Chairman, you know we don't have to have a motion for a referendum. You know that, sir.
Well, then we have to have something that says we're not going to vote on this.
Well, we can vote to table this and go back to the drawing board.
All right. Do you want to make that motion and withdraw the referendum?
I thought I made myself perfectly clear in my comments.
So we have no point of action here, but you did second it.
I guess I was just curious as to why you would ask Mr. Bozar to make a motion on a referendum.
Because he wanted to talk about it, we had to put it on the table. So now, do you want to talk about it?
No, I've made my comments. I stand by my comments, and my comments are factual and
right.
true and clear.
Well, let me discuss
I just
what
felt like Mr. Bozar was being drugged into something there purposely.
That would be inappropriate, wouldn't it, Mr. Jones?
I didn't say that, Mr.
The reason
Chairman.
we bring up the referendum issue is it must come from the people. It must be a certain number of people must come in. No one in the county can spend any money on that because the county employees are forbidden to do that, and we don't act on it unless it comes from the people. If you recall the example of the school referendum that failed in 14 and passed in, I guess, 16, that was run by private and citizens groups that brought that referendum forward. A referendum cannot be an act of a governmental body, you see? So what you seem to be suggesting is a public upswell of moving a referendum forward. Now, normally those would be held in an election year. So I'm just explaining to my fellow councilmen here what my poor understanding of all this is, that it would probably take us a year to get it organized. And again, no member of council or any government employee could participate in organizing the referendum. It must come from you. Secondly, it would probably be queued up in an election year of 2020, which is a year and a half from now, okay? So then, if it passes, it then comes in for a budgetary consideration by the council in 2021, and in 2022, we'd begin collecting money against that. And in 2023, or thereabouts, somewhere in there, 3.5 years from now, we begin to react to what our good captain here and our other volunteers believe to be a point of crisis. So that is helpful. Let me also point out to you that when we did Lugoff Fire District and increased their budget by $23 per per parcel of land. This county enacted that without a referendum. That motion in 2015 was put forward by a councilman in here who's arguing for a referendum. So I'm beginning to see that slightly inconsistent. But at any rate, you surely see, fellow members of the council, that we have a pressing need of life and death, and I believe that to be true. And we have to reward our volunteers, our great unsung volunteers, when we have, in accordance with this document, 2030, voted into place in March of 16, that we agreed we'd work on that, and for 3 years we have been working on it, on what I believe to be a crisis. We have addressed what we said we would in here, and public safety and security is our job one up here, and we have addressed the needs of our sheriff. We've addressed the needs of the SROs. We have addressed the needs of EMS. We have the best EMS in the state, right, Gerald? We've addressed all those security needs, and yet our firemen remain unaddressed. Nobody rushed into this. This has been a part of the plan. I thank Mr. Connell and Mr. Gardner for leading us to this point. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Snodgrass.
I think it's important to understand when we're talking about a referendum that we remember the form of government in which we have here in the United States of America, that it's a democratic republic. It is a representative government. We're not a pure democracy in which we put everything as a question to the people. I mean, you see that as evidence through how we elect our president, how we elect our federal leaders and state leaders. And so for that reason, you have elected us, and I can't speak for everyone. Well, I can. We've done our homework, and we've done our job to reach out to you as your representative to receive feedback. And that's why I went to work so hard. The feedback was, firemen need this. The citizens are concerned about this. So from my view, we met in the middle. And so I think it's important to remember the style of government in which we operate under. Also, a referendum, the precedent for referendums are things that affect the county as a whole. Lugoff, for instance, they didn't do a referendum because it only affected those citizens within that Lugoff Fire District. Same thing here with the Kershaw County Fire District. That's not going to affect every citizen in the county like the education referendum did with the sales tax. It's only going to affect those members of the Kershaw County Fire Service District, which includes folks in Blaney, folks out in Antioch, folks in Cassett and Bethune, Mount Pisgah areas. And so for that reason, that's why I feel like we're on the right track. So
I'm ready to call the question. If we're ready to move to a vote on the fire fee as amended, all those in favor signify.
I need some clarity.
Okay, Mr. Tucker,
We have
go
an
ahead.
amendment on the floor we have to address first.
That's correct.
That's what you're doing?
That's
Okay,
what
so
we're
that's,
doing.
I just
Yeah,
want to make
thank you.
sure. Yes, sir.
All right.
Right. That's what
You
we're
want to
addressing.
withdraw your amendment?
Yeah, he withdraws his amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
An amendment is withdrawn.
Thank you.
With that, we move to a vote. All those in favor of the amended fire fee signify by raising your hand. And it's Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Tucker, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Burns, and Mr. Connell. All those in opposition are Mr. Jones and Mr. Bozart. And the amendment passes, and we move on to the next item, which is item number 2. Danny, if you do the honors. Item number 2 is at tab. It's not at tab because it's a major product. All of you have got it. I will say it's the third reading of an ordinance to provide budget appropriations for county purposes in the county of Kershaw for the fiscal year beginning 1 July and ending 30 June, and adopt and implement the charge and collection of service and user rates.
I can't hear you, Mr. Chairman.
Please, as y'all be quiet as you leave, please. Thank you very much. And to continue, thank you, Mr. Jones. A collection of service and user rates and fees for other tax purposes and county appropriation purposes. Can we have a motion to approve the budget?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the budget for 2019-2020.
Mr. Tucker, a second.
Second.
A second from Mr. Snodgrass. Discussion and amendments. I turn to Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is one amendment I would like to address, and it's dealing with our sheriff. I would like to make an amendment that we appropriate $10,000 in his pay salary, which was removed in his salary as a new elected sheriff back in January.
We have a motion to increase the sheriff's salary by $10,000. We'll get into discussion where that comes from in a moment. Second, please.
Second.
Second from Mr. Snodgrass. Discussion led by Mr. Tucker.
Thank you.
And be clear about where that's going to come from.
Yes,
please.
sir. That money is already in the budget. It's not new money that we have to pull out of reserves or raise any taxes or fees. What happened as a new sheriff or any new elected official, the county brings you back down to your base pay. And so what happened with our sheriff was that he took a $20,000 hit when he got elected in November. And so what we're trying to do now, since he would have completed, as normal people, any 3 months or 6 months probationary period, that we bring him back up somewhat to where the salary was. So you can look at it one or two ways. You're either restoring half of his salary he took, or we only give him a $10,000 cut. But he's still not being made whole yet, and we don't want to make him whole. We want him to continue to work and prove his skills and his services to the people, and then we'll work on that. But you can't have your chief officer of the county barely making over what his cabinet's making. That doesn't go too well for leadership.
Mr. Snodgrass?
Thank you. I agree with what Mr. Tucker is saying. That.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. This is not an increase. This is an adjustment to do the right thing, and I agree with you 100%.
Okay, very good. Other comments? Ready to call the question? We have the motion to increase the sheriff's salary above base $10,000. Can we now move to a vote? All those in favor, so signify. It's unanimous, Mary, and that one passes. We move now away from the, we now need to move on the budget. Can we have a motion to approve the budget as amended?
Excuse me, I have an amendment.
Yes, sir, go right ahead.
I want to make the motion that we instruct the administrator to find $10,000 for United Way.
We have a second.
Second.
Second from Mr. Snodgrass. Discussion? Mr. Carpenter, you're clear on where that would come from? Good luck.
Thank you.
Do your magic.
I've got a
Mr.
comment.
Gardner, will you be abstaining?
I will.
Okay, with Mr. Gardner abstaining, we move to a vote.
Sir, you have a question, a couple of questions.
I was at a comment. I ate some cashews, and I thought Jimmy was going to talk, and so I thought I had time to.
Pass the cashews down here, please. It's supper time.
I just want to reiterate what I said last meeting, that this is all about taking a little bit of an investment and investing in private sector nonprofit, and they can do 10 times the work that we could do. We had someone in public comment earlier mention about council doing Christ-like work, and that really got me thinking. And this is a part of doing Christ-like work. Giving to these outside agencies, which takes a little bit of what we give them and multiplies it over and over and over to create a safety net for the marginalized, to create a safety net for those who may fall through the cracks. The United Way does that. Council on Aging does that. So you want to talk about a council who's Christ-like? This is a part of what we're doing to look like Jesus to our community. Thank you.
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Connell. Ben?
I just want to say I support the United Way. I think I've cooked for them in the past and donated as well. But I just have no idea what this $10,000 would go to. And since the original presentation, I haven't heard from anybody at the United Way after the second reading. I just don't know what it'd be spent on, and therefore I couldn't answer the question if one of the taxpayers came up to me and said, what are we giving these government funds to a private entity for? I mean, I support them. I think they do great work, but I kind of need to know that in order to answer that internal question.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Tucker, fire
Thank
away.
you. If I may remind you, it's in your packet. Everything was spelled out. Their initial request was 15. We only gave them 5. So if you look back in your initial package, you can read that, what they were requesting and what they were going to do with the monies. It was in our contribution agency package.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments? With Mr. Little here, Bruce, thank you for everything you do. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. We have Mr. Jones, Mr. Burns, Mr. Tucker, and Mr. Snodgrass. All those in opposition, Mr. Connell and Mr. Bozard and Mr. Gardner abstaining. The motion passes an amendment. We now have 2 amendments that have passed. Any further amendments on the budget? The first amendment was for the sheriff's pay increase, and the second amendment was for United Way increase, both of $10,000. I'm ready to move to those amendments on the budget. Can we have a motion to approve the budget as amended?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Tucker, a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Snodgrass. Discussion further? Seeing there is none.
Mr. Chairman, I
Jimmy.
cannot support the budget tonight due to the fact of us putting $200,000 in a splash pad and $400,000 into the swampland addition. Thank you.
Very good. Any further discussion? All right, we move to a vote. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Tucker, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Burns, and Mr. Connell. And those in opposition, Mr. Jones and Mr. Bozard. The budget passes on third reading. We move now to the third reading, item number 3, which is at tab D, and on the screen, this is into the millage part. I'll just ask Mr. Carpenter to earn his breakfast tonight. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, this is the third reading of the ordinance that will set the millage that is necessary to generate the revenue to pay for the budget that council has just approved.
Very good. Can we have a motion to approve? Mr. Tucker?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we approve third reading on setting the millage.
Second. Mr. Snodgrass?
Second.
All right. And we move now to discussion and amendments.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment.
Mr. Snodgrass, go right ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we amend the ordinance to increase fire district millage by 0.9 mils, to move it from 9.7 to 10.6 mils.
So we have an amendment to increase the fire millage by 0.9 mils. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Second from Mr. Connell, our expert on fire. Discussion, please, sir.
Sure. This is the second part of the revised fire proposal plan, and I know it's not popular every time you talk about an increase in millage, but if this goes through, then this is still significantly cheaper than what the original plan was. If this would go through, you're looking at an increase of about $3.60 per $100,000 on a home, which would bring that to a total of $42 on each $100,000 home. When you add that in with the $29 fee that we just passed, you're looking at a citizen paying $71 annually for expanded professional career fire service.
Very good. Mr. Tucker, yeah, Mr. Connell, you were our second. Any comments?
No, I just want to clarify that it was $3.60 per year.
Per year, yes, sir.
Yeah, per $100,000 house.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Other discussion? Seeing there is none, let's move to a vote on that, and we'll address other amendments. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Tucker, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Burns, and Mr. Connell. All those in opposition, Mr. Jones and Mr. Bozard. The motion passes. Is there another amendment? Mr. Tucker.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, would like to make an amendment to the budget millage that we appropriate the $549,880 to Central Carolina Technical College as a part of the operation budget corresponding millage is 2.4 mils to be funded. Therefore, I make a motion to adopt the county millage ordinance before council on the third reading, which contains, are you ready?
Wow, yes.
County operation and personal budget, 65.8. County debt service, 10.6. County fire, 10.6. County sewer, 2.6.
Okay, slow down.
Okay.
6.5 for what?
I didn't say anything, 6.5. Okay, let's start back over. County operations, personal budget.
Now, how much of this has changed?
Just 2 line items, fire and.
Let's address the change.
Okay, is that easier?
Yes, that's the way we should do it, yeah.
All
Change
right.
what?
Go down to where it says county fire. That's going to be 10.6. That's the amendment just passed.
Yeah.
And then Central Carolina will be 2.4.
And that was previously 2.3?
Yes, sir, but you can't do 3.33.
Okay,
It's
so-
not good accounting. That's coming from our executive
All right.
finance and also administrator.
Okay, let me see if I can read it back and maybe simplify it. We'll change the millage chart that's in front of us to fire to read 10.6 and the CCTC to read 2.4.
That's correct.
Okay, we have a second.
Second.
Second from Mr. Snodgrass. Discussion, Sammy, please.
Yes, we previously had approved the millage increase, but after talking with staff and our finance director, those numbers would not work for finance purposes, so we had to readjust that. And of course, you just read about the increase in the fire. So that's where we are to fund Central Carolina, as we've already voted on and approved, and the amount stays the same.
Let me ask if Vic and our legal guys have the information you need. Has that been correctly stated?
Yes.
Okay? And that'll carry it forward. Of course it was correct.
Exactly.
Question.
Yeah, Mr. Jones, please, go right ahead, sir.
Mr. Carpenter, give me a total on the millage increase from last year.
Total increase from last year will be 3.3.
That's everything.
That's everything, yes, sir.
3.3 mils.
Well, with the caveat that the 0.9 mils is only on people in the county fire district, so that will not affect anybody in the Lugoff Fire District nor anybody in the Camden Fire District.
So that was the issue that you had, Jimmy, about double taxation.
Correct.
Nobody's double taxed.
And just a point of just clarity that the Camden Fire District includes unincorporated areas like East Camden as well. That
Pretty much anybody with water from the city of Camden.
Correct.
Yep. Is that, why don't you speak into the microphone on that, because I wanted everybody to hear it. Define the Camden district, would you, Mr. Carpenter?
It's the territory outside the city that is provided fire protection by the city, and that roughly equates to everybody who has a water tap from the city of Camden.
Which in summary is why Act 388 is killing us. All right. All right. Other comments? Ready to call the question? We have a restated amendment, Mary. We have 2 amendments, but the second one was fire going to 10.6 and CCTC a 2.4 mils. Sir.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make sure that everybody knows that the scholarship money has not changed. I mean, that did not change in this motion. There's still $50,000 of scholarship money in there.
Built into the millage.
Right, absolutely.
That's understood.
Okay, I just want to make sure it was.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. Okay. So with that, we move to a vote. All those in favor of the amendment on the millage, as stated by Mr. Tucker, signify by raising your hand. Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Tucker, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Burns, and Mr. Connell. And those in opposition are Mr. Bozard and Mr. Jones. The motion in the millage passes. We now have, I think, 2 amendments, one from Mr. Snodgrass and Mr. Tucker. Can we have a motion to approve those 2 amendments as stated?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tucker?
The ordinance is amended, you mean?
Say again?
Approving the ordinance as amended.
Yes, correct.
We've already done that. I haven't made any amendments to the budget.
Well, you didn't make any amendments this time. I'm losing track. Yes, you did.
Oh, we're on the millage. I'm sorry.
On the millage, yes, you did.
Yeah, on the millage. The budget.
Okay, I thought I was losing my mind. So
I'm
we have
losing my
two
mind.
amendments before that have been passed. Now, we have a first, and now we need a second to vote on these amendments as a part of the millage ordinance.
We've already voted on the amendments. We need to vote on the
That's
ordinance
correct.
as amended.
That's what I meant to say, yeah.
Okay.
Ordinance as amended.
Here we go.
Okay?
My bad.
Second. Okay, we have a second from Mr. Snodgrass. We move to any discussion. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Tucker, Mr. Gardner, Burns, and Mr. Connell. All those in opposition remain Mr. Tucker, Mr. Bozard, and Mr. Jones. And the millage ordinance passes on third reading. We move now to the fourth item on the budget. Not a budget, thank goodness. It's tab E. Cue us up, Danny. It's the third reading of an ordinance restating Chapter 13. Vic, restate that for us.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, you have in front of you tonight for third reading and the ordinance as amended, the ordinance as has been amended to bring the county's utilities ordinance into compliance with EPA requirements, specifically make minor clarifications and spacing corrections, changing definitions to come in compliance, to amend and delete sections, local sections on the various BODs, TSS, and TKN levels as necessary, and to amend mandatory requirements, amending enforcement language, and adding language for surcharge programs for those, and to make other clerical and procedural changes. Essentially, this is a result of EPA changing standards and changing requirements that we are then required to bring our enabling legislation into compliance with their mandates.
Can we have a motion to approve the changes to Chapter 13?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tucker, a second?
Second.
Mr. Gardner, discussion? Pretty straightforward, and I thank the staff for a lot of hard work. With that, we move to a vote. Yeah, Mr. Jones, go right ahead.
Some clarification. Mr. Carpenter, staff will handle this?
Yes, sir.
No additional cost?
No cost, and a fee is only impacting a few industrial users.
Thank you.
Yep, good question. Call the question. All those in favor, so signify by raising your hand. And it's unanimous, and it passes on third reading. We move to new business. Item number 1 is the Lugoff Fire Department annual budget. Do we have members here tonight? Oh, I see Bob. And we got the team back there, the captain himself. Sir, the chief, Mr. Carpenter, can you introduce this? I believe it's at tab F.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, Lugoff Fire is required to present their budget to the council for its approval. There are no requested increases in fees or in millage.
Can we have a motion to approve the Lugoff Fire District budget?
So moved.
Mr. Jones, a second?
Second that.
Second, Mr. Connell. Discussion, and if you want, we can invite the chief up to defend the budget.
I think this
Mr.
is,
Tucker?
I'm sorry, excuse me.
I think it would be all right. Would you like?
Fine.
Chief, come on up. We'd love to see you. We made you sit through 3 hours of our problems. And thanks for all you do, sir.
Ribs, so. Go ahead.
This is your second budget, correct?
Yes, believe it or not. Yeah. My first budget was interim.
And you've asked for no increases in either one?
No, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Connell.
I know the pressures you've been facing. How have you been able to manage that without any increases?
We've had to make cuts. I mean, one of the things that we have to discuss is, it's just like we talked here, it's stated there. We're having to make cuts where I didn't essentially like to make that cut. Last year, we consolidated a position. We gave up a position, a full-time position, to make sure we balanced the budget. Unfortunately, Chief Cato was the guy that had to deal with that because he's taken on two roles now. So biggest things we see is some of the revenues is not changing. Now, the value of the mill went up this year, and of course, we deal with Miss Robin Watkins, and she does a fantastic job at giving us of what is projected. And of course, everything up there, that's a projected revenue. One of the things we look at, though, that is not projected, that is truth, is retirement. I mean, we're up to 18.24% this year. That's another 1%. We're going to continue to go up another percent every year. That 1% don't sound like much, but when you're on a $29 billion deficit for retirement in the state of South Carolina, that's not million, that's billion. We're in the billions, $29 billion. That includes public safety, that includes teachers. It's a tough battle. Insurance, I shop around every year, and I've learned to do that. We're looking at a 9% increase on our insurance, on our health insurance. So that forces me to have to shop around and find the best insurance possible for our people, so we're not passing that down to them as it is now. We're in public safety. We're not making a lot of money. It's just the way it is. We chose this profession because it was in our heart, and that's what we chose to do. The value of the meal, again, it went up, but, we've decreased over the years. Even with the value going up this year, we decreased by, since 2015, 6.1%. That's roughly about $75,000, somewhere in that range. So what we're doing is, I'm cutting it back. I'm trimming the fat, and there's not a whole lot to trim, and these guys will tell you that, they're constantly asking for things that I just can't give them.
Well, Chris, I call it good management, okay?
Well, I appreciate
Because
that.
we can never give enough money to furnish as many law enforcement that you want or as many firemen that you want. We couldn't afford it. Just no way, and it takes good, tight management. I'll tell you, I'm very proud of our Kershaw County volunteers, and I'm very proud of our Kershaw County and the city of Camden. They all do great work.
Absolutely. I agree.
Talk to me about philo. I see the value of the mill went up $1,000. That's helpful.
Yeah, it is helpful. And then, of course, we get our numbers from the fee and lieu pretty much stayed about what it was last year. That's just something we work with. We deal with it. There's nothing I can do to change that. The Invista fee, the Invista contract, that is something we worked out with Invista, and that's another thing. That's why Invista, when we look at jobs in the county, and not only just in the county, but I look at that number, and I see if that number in Invista disappears, that's a fireman. That's a fireman and a half gone, basically.
Yeah.
That's paying for personnel. And we've got a close relationship with them. We're providing some training for them. We're working with them on a daily basis. And it's turning out to be beneficial for both of us, for us and Invista. And, some of the older guys, like we had mentioned in the fire service, back in the day, Invista, when it was DuPont, when we had a hazmat incident here in this county, that's who you were calling. Those guys were coming to us, and that's reversed. That's a reversed role